There was no hash culture in America, but now since this book, it taught everybody water extraction, sieve sizes. It changed my life.
People's whole lives and brands are revolve around just that one piece of knowledge right there.
Phenol is responsible for the autoflowering effect because of the way it lowers the cannabinoid levels.
What came to be called ruderalis in our world came from Nebel. And those are collected on the side of the road in Hungary. And that is definitely not autoflower.
First Smoke family, we're here. I would call this the Marijuana Castle 2.0, but either way, we're here at Todd's house, and I'm so honored today to be able to sit down with two guys that I can remember thinking about and hearing about when I was in Florida coming up, and to sit down with Todd and have it go over unbelievable if you've seen that podcast, and now to be able to sit down with Robert today, Robert Clarke, someone we've been looking to get on for over 3 years since we started this podcast, and to be able to have the opportunity now to sit here at Todd's house with these two gentlemen, lifelong checkbox for so many growers out there. If you're passionate about cannabis cultivation, if you're passionate about the plant, if you smoke flower and you love cannabis, this one's for you. Robert, Todd, thank you for first smoke of the day, man. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
No, man, I'm excited. So I got here today. We got a grand tour of this unbelievable castle. We'll call it 2.0 castle, Todd. And you were working. What are you working on right now, Rob? And can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing? Because we have some books out for some people that might not know you. I know a lot of people have been requesting you. What are you working on right now, and what are you doing?
Well, unsurprisingly, I'm working on another book. But, yeah, it'll be called Cannabis Botany, 21st Century Advances. Don't run to Amazon yet. It won't be out for a year, probably, but still working on it. Been at it 2 years, and it's a lot of stuff to understand. It was marijuana botany was more than 40 years ago, and lots happened since then. So yeah, it's time to do a little catch up.
I like that. And Todd, one of the things I think was really cool, and I'd like to start here is, Robert, you've traveled to the Himalayas, Afghanistan, all around the world for the plant. Is there one trip that felt like it really defined your lifelong chase, or this lifelong chase for education and cannabis?
Gee, they all tie together. I never went to Afghanistan. David Watson and others went there and collected seeds. I never went there.
Okay.
But I did go to the other spots. My thrust has been really with ethnobotany. It's been studying the plant and the peoples around it. And I think the greatest education for me was visiting China. To go to places where people have been using the hemp for fiber, eating it for seed, and also using it for getting high. Wow. Nepal is much the same way. It's another place they use the plant for all three possibilities, which is a modern theme too. Dual cropping with hemp crops to get fiber and seed, or now triple cropping to get cannabinoids or other compounds. It's like many things we do with the cannabis plant, they've been done for a long time.
Yeah.
It's funny because Todd literally reiterated that earlier. We went into your library. Todd pulls out a book from, what was it, 1877?
Yeah, 1877.
And it's talking about cannabis and how to use it and how the oil is actually the essential part. And this is where the terpenes are. And it's like, wait, what? When is this written? Because we always think like our generation discovered something the ones before us didn't. Robert, was there a time in your travels where you realized like, oh, cannabis is my life? Was it early on? Was it later in life where you go, oh, my life's work is centralized around this plant?
Oh, it happened way earlier than that. It happened in school. I mean, I went to the University of California at Santa Cruz. Uncle Charlie's summer camp, as it was affectionately known. And I was surprised when I got there. I wanted to go to Berkeley, but a real science school. And when I got to Santa Cruz, which is where I got in, I realized they didn't have any grades. And that was kind of a shock. I didn't know how that was going to work out. And it took me a while to graduate, but that's where I learned about cannabis. And that's where I wrote my undergraduate dissertation, the Botany and Ecology of Cannabis.
Yeah.
And self-published, in the end, 1,500 copies of this. Stapled them myself.
That one's the first of 500. It says one of 500 in that one.
Yeah, you got one of those.
Well, yeah, what's the thought, though, when you put this together and you turn this in? Were people like, oh, wow, this is so interesting? Or were they like, what are you doing with cannabis, Robert?
Well, they had the questions, of course.
Yeah.
And probably they would have wished I'd studied something else, but everybody has to graduate, and it was UC Santa Cruz after all. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. But the main thing I showed them was a book I found in the library at UC Santa Cruz. And it was published in 1972, if I remember right. And that was Mark Merlin's dissertation, master's dissertation, from UC Santa Barbara, called Man and Marijuana. And that's also where my ethnobotany side came from. It's from Mark. And we went on to write the book on the table there, the Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany. And that's been out for a dozen years now, I guess. But,
2013?
Yeah.
Published by California University Press,
Yeah,
no less?
University of California Press for that one. So we went to the academic press and did that. It still sells. It's kind of the encyclopedia. But.
Yeah, that's what people know it as. I mean, especially marijuana botany. I mean, that's on every grower's shelf. If you actually read books, if you're that type for cannabis, because some aren't, but if you're that type, this is in your library. And let me start here then, Rob. As your journey starts with cannabis, where does it start and how? I'd like to start from the beginning, if you don't mind, and just talk about where did the passion really start? Where'd that seed get planted?
I suppose it got planted the first hit of weed I took, well, not the first, but the first getting high experiences I had with cannabis. I never got high till I went to the university. That's the other thing that changed when I got to Santa Cruz. First night I was there, our resident assistant had taken dormitory funds and purchased a $10 bag of weed, a gallon bottle of Bargetto's red wine, and that's how we got oriented to the university. So I watched people smoke weed, and I tried it, and I didn't really get high, but the second or third time I tried it, I did, and I've never really looked back. It's always been I don't get high all the time, but it's been a spirit, a guiding force. I mean, no, I'm a scientist, but there's something behind that. I call her Mother Cannabis. I mean, every time you think you've answered a question, maybe you have, but she just throws you another one. So it's always going on.
And was it like, wow, what is this? People grow this? Was it that like about the growing side, or was it more about the science side of like what's happening in my brain and why do I feel this way for you?
That wasn't it so much either. I've never really gotten into unraveling the medicinal complexities either. But no, I realized immediately that people didn't know much about the plant. And then when I started looking for information, found Mark's book, fantastic. That was the man and marijuana side of it for sure, and that's a big part. But there really wasn't much in the way of botany. And what was there was rather dated, and a lot of it was about hemp, not really about the drug cannabis side of it. So there was a void, and I guess that's what I tried to fill with my dissertation.
Wow.
It was amazing what you could find in those days. But
and so was the chase then, I need to get around some guys who are doing this so that I can study it firsthand and really get hands-on with it? Or was it, I'll do this myself?
No, I learned what I learned from others. I mean, I didn't learn it all from firsthand experimentation, but that phase really came more going to Amsterdam, a little farther down the line. Marijuana botany came from this book because my dissertation was seen by the publishers, and they said, why don't you write another book? And some of the illustrations in here are in here, and that's the evolution of how that worked. But,
yeah.
Hand-drawn by you as well.
Yeah, I drew a lot of these. Camera lucida style I had, because I've always been a photographer, and I had photos that didn't really stand up very well as photos, especially when you're going to try to do something in black and white, and they're kind of not that sharp color photos. So I used a slide projector and projected them on the wall and drew a lot of these rather small illustrations at 2 or 3 feet tall.
Wow.
Did them with pencil and then drafting pens.
So smart too to start big and go small because it gets, I guess, even more detailed then.
They'll advise you not to be so extreme in your reductions. But, this worked. So.
And then I'm
beautiful.
guessing when this came out and this got passed around, you had some guys come out to you and reach out and say, this changed my life.
Somebody showed it to the publisher at Andor Press in Berkeley. Yeah. And they're the ones that have published Jim Goodwin, Mel Frank, and Ed Rosenthal's Marijuana Grower's Guide. So they already had a tracker.
Trying to communicate hashish right away.
There they are. There's some glands.
Yes.
It just shows you so much study was going early on with a few of you guys who just knew like, hey, we have to cover this and we need to really explain this to people who don't understand what's going on, right? Because we can love cannabis, but then there's like a small portion of us who want to know like, well, what's going on? What is this thing? What we grow it inside now and we pay more money to keep it in a place than we live in. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then just this passion, this wave that I felt like swept across America, but it's really the world. And it's crazy how we've had such a tough battle with it in the US. You've done so much study on it. Is this normal? What's going on in the United States where we've battled with this plant this long?
Nothing that goes on in the United States is normal. I mean, in world, in the sense of the rest of the world. We're an anomaly. I mean, and the rest of the world follows us. Sorry about that. But it's whatever happens in California happens in the rest of America eventually. What happens in America happens in the rest of the world. And we were discussing the other day, I reckon anywhere in the world that has a consistent electrical grid has indoor growers.
Yeah.
When I started this, there weren't any indoor growers. You know, you had sunshine in a garden. There really weren't any commercial growers either. So, I mean, people sold a little to their neighbor if they begged them, but most people just smoked it themselves or gave it away.
Well, can I ask you then, you know, from when you started college, what year did you start college?
71.
Oh, wow. And then when did you graduate? 76?
76.
How much did the face of cannabis change over the years from the early 70s to the late 70s in Santa Cruz? Was a lot of it import? You know, was it really Acapulco, Thai, and Colombian and Michoacan? And when did you start seeing Afghan? And how was the evolution, may I ask, from import weed to guys that you knew making things like Skunk One or Saving Haze or the stuff we now think of as staples?
Sure. In the early 70s, the break point for me would have been 75. I probably saw the first homegrown bud, and it was from Sausalito. Might have been 74, but it was good. You know, it wasn't something somebody brought from the Midwest and said it was weed or something. You know, it was the real deal. But we'd already seen Thai weed by then, and Colombian and Mexican, of course, a little bit of Jamaican. We were on the West Coast. Jamaican wasn't a huge supplier, so it had to go somebody in the East Coast who brought you some on the West Coast. But Colombian went everywhere. We had more Mexican than the East Coast had, but there was a lot of imports around. But all of those are what I call narrow leaflet drug varieties, NLDs. What people today call sativas. But
why did
indica
they call them drug
didn't come along
varieties?
until considerably later, the Afghans.
Well, Rob changed the taxonomy to a large degree when he released Cannabis Ethnobotany. I remember the High Times Cannabis Cup, he stood up, gave a really wonderful dissertation about how before I went to prison, Robert sat me down and taught me about indica, sativa, and what he called Afghanica. And then when I got out of prison, I picked him up, he laughed, he said, "Remember everything I taught you about that?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, it's all wrong. I believe something else now." And he explained broadleaf drug, narrowleaf drug, and narrowleaf and broadleaf incisions, and also broadleaf hemp, narrowleaf hemp. Because if I was a good enough student, the more he studied everything, the more he saw it all intersecting. And there is samples of broadleaf and narrowleaf industrial and drug varieties all around the world because humans separated away from what they started with because we all had different uses that we wanted. And I think it's a really fascinating way to look at it. It makes more sense to me because, for me, sativa and indica to a smoker meant, light and psychedelic for sativa and heavy and sedative for indica. And to a grower, sativa meant long and spindly and lower yielding, or heavy fat buds and quicker flowering. So it meant different things to different people. But when I was working with Jack Herer and you look at Carl Linnaeus, when he called things sativa, he also named lettuce. There's lettuce sativa, and it doesn't mean it's a long flowering psychedelic lettuce. It just means you should sow it in your garden, because that's what sativa meant, was to sow or to grow. And he was naming plants that he found useful, as was industrial hemp in that time, extremely useful for the cordage and the cellulose and the oils and all the things they use it for. But then about 50 years, what year was it that they called it indica? Was 1750?
Yeah, it was Lamarck.
Lamarck, yeah.
And when to popularize it.
Yeah, and he was naming it over like India. So it was just the drug varieties that originally came from India, because they were like the original drug culture surrounding cannabis with sadhus and the yoga and all that. And so if it was a drug variety, they were calling it indica because it just meant over like India. There's a lot of things called indica that come out of India. They have nothing to do with cannabis, just like sativa. A lot of things also don't have anything to do with cannabis. It's just that in all reality, I think there's a lot of confusion in the cannabis industry, a lack of true understanding of the knowledge, which is why I've been such a geeky student of Robert since I've met. I mean, I first read your wonderful book twice sitting on a rock in Mendocino in the September of 1994 while waiting for harvest with a little flashlight in the middle of the night doing guard duty. And then fortunately got bumped into you in 94 and been one of my best friends ever since. But I was absolutely enamored with this when I picked it up for the first time. And then years later, when you came out with Hashish, I tell people all the time, there was no hash culture in America. You could maybe find some in Canada, but in 1998, when he released this book, there was no hash in America unless you flew back with some from Amsterdam or somewhere that you shouldn't have brought it. But now, since this book, it taught everybody water extraction, sieve sizes. I remember when he taught me the size of a trichrome. It's between 60 and 150 microns for those watching. It changed my life. I went out and got sieves because of you, and it made my life so much happier. So thank you, Rob.
People's whole businesses, careers, and brands are built around that. Just knowing that knowledge right there. That cannabis heads, 70 to 120 is that prime time. And then we see the 120 to 160 and 160 above is work bag and 40 below. And we see all this being perpetuated so much now that like people's whole lives and brands are revolve around just that one piece of knowledge right there.
Well, people don't know this, but it was him and David Watson that came up with calling it solventless because it didn't dissolve in water. And I call it water hash, and Robert started the whole solventless thing, really.
Really?
Oh, if it didn't bubble, there wasn't any trouble, right?
That was David's line, yeah. If it don't bubble, it ain't worth the trouble.
I love that.
But the taxonomists pretty much never agree. And there's always new methods that come along for trying to figure out the relationships between plants, the newest one being genomics, of course. So it sheds a new light on the organization, the systematics of how things are arranged, how things are related, how they're arranged, and how they're named. And sativa and indica were the two basic, and ruderalis was the third one for the wild little maybe autoflowering types. But those names were taxonomic. They were never agreed upon. Then they got used, as Todd said, they got used by growers to differentiate Afghan-related broad leaflet drug varieties, as I would like to call them, Afghans and Pakistanis. We call them Afghans. A lot of them were from Pakistan, but they're the same gene pool is the point. And those came along later, back to that chronology. I didn't see the first Afghans I know of came in 74, but I wasn't there. The first ones I saw were in 77.
Wow.
And 79, 77 and 78, 78, 79, I believe. I'll check the dates before I publish. But a man in Mendocino named Doug Furr got very large shipments of seeds from Pakistan, from the Tirah Valley. They were called Afghan, but they're really from Pakistan. And they came in pound lots. I mean, he got probably almost 10 pounds of seeds.
Wow.
And they went around to a lot of people. And that's probably the major founder effect for indica, as we would call it now, for the Afghan, let's just call them broad leaflet drug varieties. It's a little bit easier. BLDs, everybody. And that's probably the biggest founder effect for what went on, aside from people's individual lines, because those went out to a bunch of people. It's probably where CBD came to us, for instance, and mildews, and powdery mildew susceptibility, and botrytis susceptibility, and dankness, and gas, and all those things too. So yeah, we owe a lot to Afghan. And we're still struggling to get rid of the problems. So.
And it all came through that one person.
Arranged through that one person. Somebody collected it and got them to him. But
did you ever meet Steve Murphy, the gentleman that supplied the Afghan to Greg for the Northern Lights?
I never met Steve Murphy, but you mentioned earlier, growing indoors.
Yeah.
And he was in Seattle, indoor friendly.
The indoor sun shop.
Yeah, an outdoor and friendly place. And that's where fluorescent lighting started in my mind was...
he definitely, his first book was about 74, 75. Yeah. It was the most, out of all my collections, he had 10 by 20 trays. He had CO2 enrichment. He had cloning techniques. It's everything we do now. And it doesn't surprise me because the indoor sun shop had been open since the 60s and is still open today. It's still a family-run business. So good for Steve Murphy.
Yeah, for sure. Another creative author named Murphy Stevens.
Murphy Stevens, yes. It was Stevens.
That's how you find his books. Actually.
Murphy Stevens, correct. How to Grow Marijuana Indoors Under Lights. I believe it first was released in 74, and there was quite a few revisions. I have about a dozen of them through 74 to 80.
Is
really
that by chance who they call Seattle Steve?
No.
Or is that someone different? Okay.
I'm not sure who that is.
We used to hear about Seattle Greg, Seattle Steve, because we talk about Northern Lights. We talk about some of the stuff that made it through.
He initially gave 4 seeds of what the guys called Purist Indica. I call it the Steve Murphy Afghan, but I correct people all the time that look, the whole Hindu Kush area, Pakistani area, Afghanistan area, northern India area all has broadleaf drug varieties that we as a collective mistakenly look at and go Afghan, and I don't think we're all that correct. And until we get DNA markers of where it really comes from, we're guessing. And I get asked for Panama Red or Acapulco Gold all the time, and I have to tell people, look, what you're really asking me is a country of origin and then a method of growing or drying. If it's red, it probably was picked early, has little red hairs. If it's gold, it was literally dried in the sunlight, the chlorophyll dissipated. That's why you can have Acapulco Gold or Colombian Gold. Very distant areas from each other, but the technique was the same. We had a friend named Eagle Bill in Amsterdam who used to cure his cannabis in the sunlight, give it a gold color just to get an edge in the market. Because he had to have something unique. You remember Eagle Bill's gold pot in Amsterdam? Rest his soul.
That's funny that you say that because we've sat down with some OGs, and when I got to sit down, people were talking about the first candies that got brought to the market, because we think sometimes this is the first variety that smelled like this when we had the Skittles wave, right? And we see Skittles being such a popular variety, and then we saw blueberry, and then now the candies, right, which we call lemon cherry gelato or bubblegum gelato or runts.
But can I break this? Yeah. So as an American who went to Amsterdam in 1994 with the whole crew, and we were at the time used to dank, skunky, American, oh my God, we get there, everything was sweet. Everything was candy-ish. And we were like, where'd the cannabis go? And a lot of us were incredibly disappointed in how sweet everything was. Because when we got there, of course, we should ask Rob, but we ordered the skunk and it was sweet. And we were all, don't you know what a skunk smells like? And then every Dutch person at every Dutch coffee shop's like, I've never seen a skunk. I don't even know what a skunk is. We don't have skunks here. What are you talking about? Because there are no skunks in Europe.
One guy said in the comments, well, what about Pepe Le Pew?
That I asked my friend before. I said,
saw that?
I asked Ben Dronkers, have you ever seen a skunk outside of Pepe Le Pew on a cartoon? And he looks at me and goes, nope. And then I asked him, I was like, do you know Dutch word for skunk? He looked at me, he's like, And no, he didn't. It didn't come to him. Someone looked it up and said there is one, but there are no skunks native to Holland. Skunk. It's a North American order. Yeah, that's what he said. Skunk. Yeah, it was cute. Yeah, we were high as fuck though.
Why do you think there's so much misinformation in cannabis? You think it's with all industries, or you think it's specific to us being so outlawed and underground?
Oh, there's many causes. I mean, cannabis. The good information we had in 1980 into the 70s came through things that United Nations had done. This journal called the Bulletin on Narcotics, and things that have been financed by other groups, DEA and National Institute of Mental Health and others who were trying to basically find things wrong with marijuana and hashish. So they found out a lot of very interesting stuff, which was published because they were good scientists, but it didn't benefit their cause much. But it was a good start for others who were looking for things. And the good thing was that they had good libraries and time on their hands, and they had bibliographies. They had lists of citations, the things that they had used to back up where they got started with their personal research. So that was a really good tool to look back. But the information's always been there, but it was at first hard to find and then suppressed. There wasn't a lot of new information in the 80s, 90s, 2000. But since 2010, really, there's been last 15 years, there's been lots more research. And since the Farm Bill, 2018, 2020, the effect really hits much, much more research. And there's lots of peer-reviewed papers now, more than ever. And that's because there's not such a problem with universities saying you can do a study of cannabis. Now, most of them still are not touch the plant dissertations. They're review dissertations, very valuable. But once again, people go to the library and on the internet these days and finding everything available at the time and compiling it for the benefit of all the rest of us. So there's plenty of those in there, more than ever. And a lot of hands-on research which is kind of, in a way, surprising because almost everybody who has a grant or works at a university has federal funding, even if it's only the building they're in or the water or the electricity. But usually people have grants that involve federal grant money. So we'll see, I think in the near future at least, less research on many levels, the way things are going economically and politically. But on the other hand, private industries come into this, and independent research groups, and and universities a lot too, but they're not too worried about it. They're going ahead with science. And it's a plant they're fascinated with because less science has been done with cannabis than most other plants.
Because it was prohibited.
Yeah, it was prohibited. It was just difficult to do. Yeah. And people who did work with cannabis worked with plants like finola. Finola is the white mouse of the cannabis world. It's dioecious, which to people who study plant sexual inheritance is fascinating. It's wind-pollinated. That's fascinating. It's really fast, so it's easy to work with. You can get another generation really quick. People didn't know it was autoflowering, but it is. So it just tends to do its thing, no matter what you do. And it didn't have any THC. So that was really the workhorse for researchers. It was the white mouse, and it continues to be.
But May also, if you don't mind me asking about it, Robert, because when I first met you, you were doing the International Hemp Association. I was one of the people that bought your educational kits and went out and tabled at colleges and concerts and wherever I could and showed people your crayons and your shampoo and your conditioner and your hemp fabric and your pieces of hemp herds and all the wonderful things in that kit. And the reason I'm asking this is because at that time, you guys were doing the journal, and it was this whole other dimension into cannabis that was really fascinating to learn about through you. And I thought that your attack of trying to educate the teachers and make an educational kit that was really on the level of college professors, that was peer-reviewed, printed on hemp no less, and then distributed really to as many people as you could, colleges especially. I thought it was fantastic. But I also noticed when I was researching finola that it was the International Hemp Association that procured the seeds at the Vavilov Research Institute and then selected it to what became finola. And did you work on that?
I didn't
you guys
work on that.
Finola,
we got the
yes?
seeds together from the Vavilov Institute. Finola came from, it's also an interesting story from another point, which I'll explain right now. Finola is a direct descendant of two Vavilov sessions, VIR 313 and VIR 315. And they probably were either from individual plants in this, they came from the same place. They came from Archangel, which is in northern Siberia, Russia, near the Arctic Circle, really far north. So they were super early. And that's what was of interest. We didn't grow everything from the Vavilov, but when we were there, they'd always ask us, the International Hemp Association supported the Vavilov to get the refrigerators and freezers and things they needed and reproduce some of the varieties they had. Wow. And there were very few drug varieties in there, but about 400 hemp and wild varieties and feral varieties. So that's how we got started with them. And we got some seeds from them because they were early. We were interested in that. And they were very wild type. We crossed them with each other because they were almost identical to begin with. And the seeds just slowly matured, and a few would fall out of the plant every day, pretty much. Not even ripening and not all the seeds staying in there like you need for a grain seed variety. Obviously, you need to harvest all the seeds at once. So we had these seeds and we grew them a couple of years and bulked them up and gave them to Jace Calloway. And Jace Calloway knew Dave Pate. They're both biochemists, and they knew each other at the University of Mississippi, where Mahmoud El-Soli works and where the pot garden has always been, the government's garden. So that was small world story again. But Dave and Jace knew each other. So Jace came to visit Dave in Amsterdam, and David Watson gave him the seeds. Yeah. And he took them to Finland and grew them outdoors and selected ones that ripened more evenly, had larger seeds, and didn't shatter as much. And I'll end up having the whole tale in the upcoming book, but nothing else is put in that. It's not a hybrid. It's a direct selection from a wild, probably, plant.
I find it interesting because, look, I get that people like to say ruderalis is autoflowering, but all through the 80s and all through the 90s, nobody ever said that anything ruderalis autoflowered at all. There was no autoflower, any conversation until Sasha, who's known as the joint doctor, put out Lowrider in 2003. Right. And he was working around his dad's hemp farm. And I personally feel that phenol is responsible for the autoflowering effect because of the way it lowers the cannabinoid levels. And I, have never smoked Finola straight out. I have smoked ruderalis. It's garbage. It doesn't get you high. But I've also grown it, and it doesn't automatically flower. And if ruderalis had automatically flowered, it would have been discovered sometime in the 15 years when it was released, really 18 years between 1985 when Neville started slinging seeds of what he called ruderalis and 2003 when Sasha released Lowrider. And then when Sasha initially released Lowrider, he was saying that it was a Mexican Rudy. And that sounded like a red rather than a ruderalis, because who the fuck would be growing a ruderalis in Mexico where it's tropical and they can grow good
just
weed?
Another name.
Yes.
It's just like sativa and indica. It had a purpose taxonomically. It probably doesn't anymore. But what came to be called ruderalis in our world came from Neville. And those are collected on the side of the road in Hungary. And it would be more accurately called Tibor Szalasi, or an escape of that, which was the original land race used in Hungary. And that's what all the weedy roadside ruderol, literally roadside hemp is. And that's what he collected. And that is definitely not autoflower.
No.
Does that still grow by chance?
But
they
Mexican
still grow hemp in Hungary.
Mexican Rudy didn't necessarily have anything to do with what Neville called Rudy, called ruderalis.
Yes.
So probably a 0% chance of that.
Yeah,
I contacted Sasha recently, because I asked him about this. I was very curious. And I'm not trying to prove a point one way or the other. But what he said was the story that's been published on the internet that you've read. And it was basically just a coincidence then that his father, Jerzy, was working with what was then called Fin 314. Because 313, 315? Okay. And he was working with it. And of course, I'd have the same feelings Todd did. And it's real easy to prove. You just do some genomics, but nobody's done it yet. Nobody's done genomics to show the other assumed, and I have to say assumed, but logically possible, that Finola is the father of all but a very few Canadian grain seed varieties. And all the ones that suddenly appeared 2 years after FIN 314 arrived in Canada and were just approved either the same year or the year after Finola. So that genomics could show that very easily also. Nobody's refuted that because nobody's said in printing that that's the way it was, but a lot of people in the industry assume this.
Right.
So it'd be interesting to, genomics can prove some interesting points.
Why don't we have that happening in cannabis, Robert?
Because, well, Finola's been sequenced, but nobody, and we know that there's an autoflower
why not
gene
modern?
in
Because
there.
we saw Kevin Jodrey start to do it a little bit with the way they were mapping it, and they were making a
No, it
world.
wasn't Kevin. Phylos would be
With
where it started.
Phylos.
And Kevin McCurtain with
There you
medical
go.
genomics.
But we've never
and the
really
Cannapedia.
seen it, and we see the amount of money in cannabis. We see all this stuff, but we see no research really.
Well, that's back to where's the information? And as I said, a lot of this is pre-commercial. Well, now it's not. I mean, where you're seeing the research these days is cooperative research between universities and private industry, the things that are published, okay?
Right.
What's not published is proprietary, and it won't be published unless they decide there's an economic reason for them to publish it. Let me tell you a plant that's very difficult to learn anything about on the internet as a scientist. The closest relative of cannabis, humulus, the hop plant. Hop has been a proprietary thing since beer got hot, and that was like a long time ago. So that's all these companies that breed hops, that work with hops, that's all proprietary.
Wow.
All the varieties, almost all the varieties you see on hop-forward beers now, the IPAs, they're registered, trademarked, branded. You have to license them to grow them. This is the future of cannabis also, folks.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Nack.
But
Wow.
when you get in this space, you don't share information. You don't share varieties. The value, what happened with cannabis that makes it so brilliant, is it was crowdsourced under the prohibition radar. Come on now. Look what happened without white coats. White coats did great stuff too. Those are system financed researchers, university, forensic science, whatever, and private. You can throw them in the too. That they're what some people call serious science. It's real science, whatever. It's science. But science is also done by people who follow the scientific method who never went to school, okay? And people in our group have accomplished all kinds of great stuff. Autoflower, all female, super high, 30+% of one secondary compound in a plant, unheard of. And he started with a plant that has 3 wonderful uses. The other, one of them taken care of by Jace and others, fiber hemp, way down the road before we got to it. And there's improvements that we made there too if it becomes economically important once again. But now that you got commercially things growing, you're going to see a lack, not a lack of information available, because the curve of publications is steep and it's going to go that way for quite a while. But you're not going to see everything. But you never did.
Such a hard pill to swallow. To say it's like NASA, it's like the space race a little bit, where until money gets involved and there's an economic, like until asteroids, or if we found that we can mine $1 billion on an asteroid, now, man, we're flying that tomorrow. They're putting so much advances in science behind it, and we're pulling students and people in college. There's new courses being built just for, and you see how much push. It's so funny you bring that up with hops, and you say, wow, what an interesting coincidence that very little research. I want to ask this, Robert, when you see the future of cannabis and you just paralleled it to what we're seeing in hops, do you laugh and chuckle about how it's all passing strains around now and how just open it is versus where you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to go that route where everyone's brands are locking down genetics and breeding in-house and trademarking and copywriting?
I think as the industry matures, we'll see more of that. I mean, people don't grow their own hops so often, but they brew their own beer. And that's legal. And that doesn't threaten the hop industry. And it doesn't threaten the beer industry. And maybe people brewing their own beer is what got people interested in IPAs. I don't know. But IPAs use a tremendous amount of fresh hops compared to other kind of brews. I mean,
great parallel right there.
There's a lot of parallels with the hop plant.
And also, we now have the word thiols in our vernacular, because until 2021 and that research paper coming out of Torrance, I didn't know. I never heard of the word thiol before. I didn't know it was this sulfur-based alkaloid responsible for the stinky smell and acrid cannabis. And it really changed my perspective of how I grew cannabis because of now understanding through the research with hops how micronutrients such as sulfur made such a huge difference in the way the plant develops these alkaloids, and how it really affects the overall effect and taste and smell and vibe of the whole thing.
And that's abstracts you're referring to. And they put out a couple of good papers. And everybody knew who sniffed bottles of terpenes and tried to figure out what was going on with cannabis aromas. The terpenes weren't everything. They're most everything, just percentage-wise. They're the most prevalent class of compounds in cannabis after cannabinoids. And they're also found in thousands of plants. They're really prevalent in the whole. They're not unique to cannabis like cannabinoids. They're found in thousands of plants. So that was and fragrances and flavors, and very well known. These other ones are found in even more trace amounts, and they're not terpenes, but they're incredibly pungent. And combined with the terpenes, they make this incredibly complex range of stuff. That's very cool research. And very good stuff. It's some of the most interesting stuff that's come out in the last 5 years.
What industry do you think parallels cannabis the most? Something that we could look at and go, this is kind of like the road we've walked down, and we're going to look at getting to the point. Would you say that it's alcohol? When you talk about
not with the model that goes so far. I mean, wine, not as alcohol necessarily, although it's an alcoholic beverage.
Interesting. Yeah.
That parallels, I think. It's maintained an artisanal side, boutique side's word commonly used, but it hasn't. It's also become very huge business. But this happened on Peter's show a few years ago. What's the name of his?
It's oh, come on.
Peter Straseri.
Project. No, it's a Future Cannabis Project.
Future Cannabis Project. We were on that a few years ago. Mojave Richmond, my partner, and myself. And the guy was on there who mentioned an economic principle, I suppose it is, that craft and boutique firms, companies, movements start from mature industries. Craft brewing didn't come before Budweiser and Coors and all the big guys, and InBev and all the big guys. That came because people already drank lots of beer and they wanted something different. Okay, so if you follow this kind of thing, what's going to happen in the cannabis industry as it matures? There'll be fewer and fewer varieties smoked by more and more people. It won't mean that you don't grow the one you like, or your neighbor doesn't grow the one you like, and get all your weed from your neighbor. But most people don't drink the beer that their neighbor brews either, unless they go over to their neighbor's house. So there's a lot of parallels there. People make their own wine too. Beer is probably easier to make, and doesn't take quite so much patience to wait. But neither of those threaten what's going on. And now, very recently, you can distill. There are distillers other than the big companies. Those used to be moonshiners. Moonshiners are still around. They make their own. It's cheaper. But you could have your own distillery now. But it took forever before the handcuffs were taken off and people could actually do it, before the big distilleries didn't feel threatened.
Wow.
There are a lot of parallels with alcohol, actually. The parallel that's not there is the way we tax it. And this has been something Mojave and I have been, why don't we just copy the system that works, for God's sakes? You got 3 general classes. They overlap in alcohol content. You got your beer, you got your wine, you got your spirits, okay? Beers are getting really strong. Some are stronger than the weakest beers. It's starting to overlap. But it's 3 taxation groups. Makes it really simple. And you tax what? The active ingredient. So why don't we tax the THC? That way, it would cost less to get a 20%er on the market that might have unique characteristics that are not tied in with having 30-plussers, which basically limits you to rock bud dank and rock bud dessert, and that's pretty much it. And everybody wants that because that's what everybody knows. But if people had a chance to smoke a haze or a skunk or a Northern Lights or direct hybrids from those and just go back 20 years, 10 years, 20 years, it's a whole new world. And it's right there, all these hobbyists at Todd services. And that's where the next stuff's going to come from.
My entire customer base, Robert.
Yeah, right. That's where the next stuff's going to come from.
People that want real weed.
People with their genomics are going to come up with really interesting things. And there's some agronomic traits that are going to be really, really difficult for amateurs and people with small population bases and no genomic tools to work with. And those are things multi-gene traits and traits controlled by a gene that controls many traits, pleiotropic traits, a gene that controls many different phenotypes or phenotypic outcomes. And that's hard to just for simple breeding. Everything, all the advances we made have been pretty much a single gene or control, pretty simple things to do, normal Mendelian, simple breeding with. And we've kind of conquered a lot of those, maybe all of them, or nearly all of them. So
and what do you think the
resistance breeding and tolerance, salt tolerance, drought tolerance, and disease resistance.
First Smoke family, no matter the guest, you know we're rocking raw and Elements papers. Whether it's the Elements king size wide, the raw fatties without the crease, so you still get the king size wide, but with unbleached and uncreased. Something we've been loving on the show is the raw king size blacks. And when we're lighting up, the Phoenix. This is awesome. Flintless residue, windscreen with a poker. No matter what products you like from Raw, you can check out genuineraw.com and that gets you to all their affiliate links to purchase these products direct from them to make sure they're raw authentic. Genuineraw.com, First Smoke of the Day sent you.
Robert, one of the things I always talk about as a cultivator and where I think I see things going is I always talk about genetics being the cornerstone of what we do. This entire industry built on genetics because me as an interviewer, I sit down with growers, we talk genetics. I sit down with hash makers, we talk genetics. I sit down with rappers and musicians. What we're talking about is genetics. I mean, no matter every person that sits down with me, it's like it all boils down to a conversation about they want their own strain because they're a musician and they like smoking this. Oh, you're talking genetics. Oh, you're a hash maker and you want a 7% return and you want a certain oh, we're talking genetics. And it's like it all boils down there. Yet I think our industry is like in infancy of understanding that. What's your take on that?
Starts with cannabis is a super diverse plant. I mean, genetically, genotypically, and also phenotypically. It's not just used for fiber, food, and drugs. It also, each of those comes in very many forms. And it's been frustrating for people trying to make pure breeding varieties because it's hard to tame this diversity. And for people who are pure breeding varieties, I mean varieties grown from seed, like industrial, like grain seed hemp or fiber hemp. But the diversity is great for this new generation of asexual propagation instead of sexual propagation for seed. Asexual, no seeds, make cuttings. Okay, so then you want the diversity because you can just find one unicorn, one unique plant, as it's unicorns as they're called in our trade, and then you can asexually reproduce it. You can clone it, as people would say, and then you've got it. Cheers. The unicorn's in the corral. But you've narrowed the genetic possibilities considerably. And then when you start crossing unicorns with other unicorns, you start to get duplicorns and all kinds of strange things, and that's also good because you get more weird unicorns. But they're not true breeding. And they're not really the future in a way. Right now, everybody's really having fun wandering the candy factory. But like I was saying, pretty soon you're going to have fewer choices for more people. I don't think less people are going to start smoking cannabis. But they'll have fewer things to choose from, unless they know somebody. So that's where all that's all going. But Yeah, it's hard to predict businesses, but
Wow, that is such an interesting parallel because we hear that a lot about the genetic pool getting very narrow because of what so many growers, because, just pricing and all these different factors that are happening at once. And I feel like we're in this microclimate of we're speeding around going 200 miles an hour in this. Cannabis is it like a hyper move, right? We're moving very quickly. Yeah. And we're seeing that happen. Like if you talked about the strains everyone was growing 10 years ago, it feels like none of those are around anymore. Like people are just on to the next thing. And the thing I feel like we're losing is as we move past that field, we're dropping off. We're losing all these genetics. So we talk about with him like skunk dying off and Northern Lights and him being one of the only people and it being such a rare varietal that we rarely see it. People were calling me after Todd's episode and being like, is he for real? And this is like big breeders, guys that are, because they can't believe it. They go, nah, we haven't seen it in 20 years. What are you talking about?
It's funny you say that.
Sour diesel.
When I dropped original haze, everyone on the farms was saying he doesn't really have haze. And I woke up one morning to David Watson calling me on Skype saying, you got to see this farm. They're saying you're a liar and a charlatan and all these things. And I was like, oh my God. And I went to the link and I went to say something, but under it was Skunkman Sam saying, I don't know how you know what haze is because I never gave you any of the seeds, but I gave them to Todd and he definitely has them. So that was the end of that. I didn't even answer it. But then when I released Skunk that was acrid that I got from Mel Frank, that it came from Skunkman, this still smelled like shit. Everybody said the same thing. He doesn't really have skunk. Nobody says that anymore. And then when I got the seeds from Seattle Greg of the Purest Indica, the NL2, both of those smell like shit and make acrid and make diols, and they're acrid as well. And nobody says it anymore, but almost every step of the way over the last 5 years, people were so quick to talk down what they had no experience with because they hadn't grown what I have. And now that so many people have.
Well, and it's so rare that they hadn't seen it. So they go, nah, he can't have it.
It can't exist.
Can't exist.
And these are for those who want to breed varieties, it's really fun. I mean, a lot of people do it, and some people even made some money at it. But what Todd's got is the basic building blocks. These are the earliest selections people made. Yeah. And there haven't been a lot of landrace selections made since then, or landrace hybrids that have added as much. There's been some more, but those are the basic building blocks. They're right there. That's what the Dutch seed companies started with. So if you want to do it over again, it's really easy. They're there.
Well, I encourage now, I call them the primary colors of cannabis. And I also encourage people to reimagine cannabis because what for the last 35 plus years that I've been around the seed game since the early 90s in Amsterdam, you even longer, of course. But everybody would always ask for the fastest flowering, the heaviest yielding, not the highest quality. And I've told people many times that if I gave you a box of Crayola crayons, it was 16, and you only played with the first 9, maybe 10, you're missing colors 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and not even experiencing them. So the art's limited. And if people would, now that they learn how to grow, be open to cycling with plants that are somewhat tropical equatorial, because I really don't like to call it sativa, and experience these minor cannabinoids and unique terpenes, because your friend Mel Frank went about Steep Hill Labs started around 2007, 2008, and they tested a lot of, his real name's Jim Goodwin. They tested a lot of Mel Frank stuff. And he called me up one day and said, hey, I got my samples back. How much do you think the THCs are? I said, I don't know, teens, 20s. He goes, yeah, some of them. How much do you think my favorite one is? I said, oh, 17. He goes, 7. I said, what? He said, yeah. He goes, it makes me feel the best. It tastes the best. And if I need a little more, I just smoke another one. And I think that's the beauty of self-titration, because it doesn't really matter if it's 30%, 20%, 10%, or 7%. If you want more, you're just going to do what we all do, which is pack another bowl, roll another J, and get yourself back up to the floor you wanted to sit at anyway. Yeah. And I don't think the numbers matter so much, because I tell people all the time, look, machines don't buy cannabis, humans do. And really, it's all about that olfactory experience. We don't eat food that's the most nutritious just because it's the most nutritious, just like we don't use cannabis that's the most potent, or we don't go into a bar and say, give me some Everclear, I want to get smashed. We look for nuance, and I believe that's what it's all about with this. And I don't deal with cannabinoid numbers, and people give me a hard time about it. I say, listen, if you take one plant and you test the tops, the middles, and the bottoms, you'll get 3 different numbers. And I'm not here playing quarter mile numbers. I'm not trying to have bragging rights. It's about the experience. If you like it, you win. If you don't like it, trash it and try again.
And there's plenty of THC in there, folks.
Plenty.
There's enough in pretty much everything.
Well, I'd like to ask you this, Rob, because, one of the most fascinating elements of your career is the fact that you and your buddy David started the world's first privately funded cannabinoid and terpene research facility in the world that was not funded by a government such as in Israel or Mississippi, which is obviously U.S. government. And Hortifarm was what you gentlemen named it, which stood for, if I'm correct, horticultural pharmacy, or that was a concept there. And you guys were chasing generic THC initially, yes? Marinol coming out?
Producing a Marinol equivalent, generic equivalent from plants instead of making dronabinol synthetically.
It was when you sat me down and started teaching me about cannabinoids and terpenes in 1996 when we first met, and I was working on Hemp Life magazine. You were contributing. You opened up my whole world to it was like finally looking under the ocean and seeing all the fish and the whales, and it was amazing because your comprehension of it all was, obviously, you were just speaking about it like it was just stuff that was on your mind that day. But none of us had terpenes in our vocabulary at that point. None of us talked about minor cannabinoids. We all knew THC, sure. CBD wasn't even in the conversation. The very first CBD I ever got was given to me by him in Amsterdam, and it didn't get me high. It helped with my neck pain a little bit, and I just reported my findings back to you, but that was the first time I got into it. And what got you guys into Hortifarm, and how did you see this potential medical, because now you have to realize, people watching, there was no endocannabinoid system in the 1980s. That research happened while you guys had already found Hortifarm, and then there was the, I don't want to say advent, or the acknowledgement, I could call it, of the endocannabinoid system, and you guys were right there with all of it. You were already studying it. How did you stumble upon this? How did you guys get so far down the road with cannabis that you were doing medical research in the 80s?
Just because we had a lot of questions. There was so much to be done. I mean, none of the basic stuff had been done. Nobody had said, here, try this CBD and tell me what you think. I mean, that wasn't clinical research, and it's not peer reviewed, but science is science. That's another thing. The peer review process holds things back, and doing really good, repeatable science, the science we want to base our lives on, okay, not quick decisions about which plant to grow. That's what we need, but it slows things down. Growers, and especially with this crowdsourcing, there's no internet when this started either, everybody, but whenever one grower met another grower, they traded seeds and went, yo, here's what I do, here's what I do. A lot of that was Grateful Dead concert parking lots and places like that, but the clan gathered, rainbow gatherings, other places, I'm sure, fish concerts later in time, but it all, it was crowdsourced, even though it was difficult, and people were afraid to talk to each other. And a lot of people remain insular today and don't talk to anybody. But since the Farm Bill, and even before that, people have really been coming out of the closet. It started with medicinal cannabis, Prop 215, and this. People said, okay, I just rebranded myself. Now I grow medicine. Now I can talk to people.
When I first met you, Robert, at Pax Party House, I bumped into you. I don't know if you remember it, but I was excited because I said, I apologize for bumping into him. And I said, my name's Todd McCormick. He said, my name's Robert Clarke. And I stopped and said, marijuana botany. And he smiled at me, put his hand over his finger, and said, shh, don't blow my cover.
For real. Robert, can I ask you, you've watched from cannabis go from like taboo to full on industry. Do you feel like we've won, or do you think we've lost?
Wow.
In general, I guess I'd have to say we win. We're winning because not as many people are going to jail. And that was the main reason that Todd, especially, and all of us wanted. What we all wanted was decriminalization. That's what Normal wanted. They just wanted to decriminalize the plant and let people make their own decisions, pretty much, but quit stigmatizing the people who associate with this plant and putting them in jail, primarily. And we didn't get decriminalization because there was too much money in it. But we are getting regulation, which was bound to come anyway. And I'm all for regulation. I'm not for taxation that strangles the golden goose. but you got to support systems somehow. And we need regulation. I don't want to take a product, or any of my friends or anybody take a product that's going to make them sick or not be what's on the label primarily. But at the same time, the labels have given us this 30, if it isn't 30%, you can't sell it. So it's everything's a two-edged sort of balance, and we've gone the right direction. One fundamental step has been roughly achieved. People still get arrested, but now they're breaking different laws. But there aren't as many people going to jail, and a few people have even been pardoned, if I understand correctly. So
Definitely.
that's good. But is it gonna? I think in general, the whole industry is going to make cannabis products much more boring. But that's not going to kill the glow. It's not going to kill the fascination. It's still going to be your neighbor or yourself. The handcuffs are off, pretty much. Don't go do anything. Right now, to make problems for yourself, you have to do something really super stupid. So don't go out and do anything super stupid, and you're fine. You can do what you want. Don't just grow plants. Make your own variety. Grow just one plant. You know how to make cuttings now. Anybody can do it. Grow one plant that rocks your socks and just grow that. That's worth buying a pack of seeds and a light just to do that. And it's also different. Every once in a while, I heard it again just the other day. Somebody who claims that only one variety of cannabis works for their medical indication. And I forget what the indication was, but it's something where you really need medicine, okay? And they try everything, and when they can't get the variety they like, they don't grow, they're not able to. They have a friend that grows it for them. When this person can't get that, they don't feel good. And you could say it's psychosomatic, it's an N of one experiment, who knows? But you hear this more than once.
But also, who are we to say that to them, right? They're the ones going through whatever. So
exactly.
Well, one of the reasons I liked Hashish when 1995 in San Diego, I started the San Diego Compassion Club, where we were not charging anybody any money. We were just redistributing donated cannabis to people, and sometimes donated hashish. And I really liked being able to give out hashish more than cannabis because of the inconsistency in the flowers compared to the consistency in the extracts. And if somebody had a few grams or an ounce of hash every time they used it, it was a very similar experience compared to if they had an ounce of flowers or a QP. You can drift a little flower to flower, never mind variety to variety. And it's just the way it is. And when you're sick, I've had cancer 10 times. Consistency is important.
Yeah, really
and for people like me that I have a spinal fusion, touching my neck every few minutes because it hurts. It's the way that I get through my day without opiates. And it's been the way. I mean, I was 12 years old. They gave me a motorcycle, and I was out riding trails, and I'm wearing a helmet. And I went to my doctor, my pediatrician, Peter Smith. I said, "Can you give me something for my neck pain?" He said, "No. Anything I give you is going to be psychologically or physically addictive, Todd, and you're going to have to learn to deal with it. It won't go away." And I was like, "What am I going to do?" And he joked. He said, "Why don't you try smoking your mom's pot?" And I was 12, and I thought he was like, I was like, come on. Even if for a 12-year-old, I was like, that is not solid advice. But I went home and told my mom, Peter Smith told me I should ask you for some pot. And she was like, what? She was like, grab a bag.
Wow.
And my mom sold weed. And that's how I started selling weed. But I started smoking when I was 9 with my mom because I was coming home from chemotherapy and radiation one day. I had cancer between my left lung and my heart. I have a big scar right here. And my mom had read in Good Housekeeping that they were using it for cancer patients, and she brought it up to Peter. And Peter, at that time, I had cancer 9 times in 8 years, and they didn't expect me to make it very long. And he was like, "You have nothing to lose." And that night, she drove home, gave me a little joint, said, "Scoot down into the little wheel well of the car," and she said, "Sip it like it was a straw." And when I got home, I wanted sauteed spinach. And I was like feeling great. And then the next day she didn't give me any, and she came upstairs and gave me some. And we sat there listening to Don McLean's American Pie on 45. I had to flip it over halfway through. I'm singing, "Today is going to be the day that I die." She's like, no. I was happy as shit though. I didn't die, turns out. But medically, it makes a big, big difference. And this is why when I met you and you were doing Hortifarm, look, I was hanging out with Elvie Musica at the time. She got her marijuana directly from the federal government. Elvie got 300 joints a month given to her in a can. It was grown at the University of Mississippi by Mahal Mindosoli and his crew. It was rolled up at the Research Triangle Institute and distributed out. And she was the first free human I met in the world, because she truly believed that she was legal because of her prescription. And this sounds silly and a little hippie, but I was high one night and listening to Bob Marley, and that line where he says, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind." It freaking hit me like a sledgehammer, because I was like, it really is an emancipation of mental slavery, because all of us feel this prohibition, this, oh, we can't do what we want, like, oh, they got us so well. And here's this little old lady Elvie running around with glaucoma telling cops, "You can't take my shit away, this is legal." And they were like, dude, she was so adamant about it, the police were like, "I don't want to deal with you." Elvie's a very fierce woman. And I wanted to kind of get that attitude of belief. And when I met you and you started teaching me about cannabinoids and terpenes and stuff, I was, I felt like a little kid sitting there drooling. Like, it was phenomenal he was working on Hashish at the time, and you gave me a really good contribution for my magazine that I titled Hashish Enlightenment. Because that's what I felt like happened to me, man. Like, when I was sitting around him and learning about trichrome sizes and cannabinoid levels, and I was on another level, He's teaching me how to snap the resin head off of the stalk and sieve it, and it was amazing what you guys were doing. And then you brought over the hash tech where you just use your hands and the gloves, and they would use static electricity to attract the resin heads, and then they would wipe off the resin heads, and they would have this damn near 8% resin heads and no stalks and no contamination. And that's what you would hit it with. It would be like a little powder, but you would put it in your hand and you could feel it start to like coagulate and clump up. And then you put your thumb on and just hold it for a second, it would all smush, and you could turn it into this little round ball of immediately hard, rock hard hash, but you'd put it in your bowl and then touch it to the lighter and just melt to nothing. And it was absolutely magical that you guys were making, and I'd never seen anything like it. You couldn't purchase it. And, how long did it take you to write this book, and what got you down that path?
Quite a while. This book started because I moved to Amsterdam. I moved to Europe. I moved to a hashish culture. They weren't a weed culture when we got there. Americans brought weed to Europe, basically, but they'd had hash and smoked it with tobacco mostly. Didn't even smoke hash pipes that much. Chillums a bit if people had been to India, or water pipes if they'd been to Afghanistan or Pakistan or India. But yeah, it was a hash culture. And there were a lot of people in the business, and I knew people who I interviewed them. What I didn't do intentionally was write down or focus on any of the stories, because I was after how'd they make hash and who made it and where'd they make it and that kind of stuff, which is basically what this book's about. What I wish I'd done it was just tape recorded all these stories. Of course, in those days, they wouldn't have let me do it, but gone home and written them down before I went to bed. But stories like you wouldn't believe, but not the kind of stuff that was going to end up in this book. It's 400 pages.
Smuggling stories?
Yeah, smuggling stories and things like that. Any stories I could put in, I would, but smugglers always end up telling smuggling stories.
Sure, that
I'm just a little kid, with these much older guys. I'm like, wow, that's far up. But sometimes I get the look. I just want to write about the plants and the people. Don't worry. So everything was fine.
Well,
halfway through the story, they look at you like, are you taking this down?
Yeah. Why are you asking me so many details, children? But this leads me to Legends, sir, because I went to a couple of your events in Amsterdam with David, and it was Legends, for people watching, was almost like a world mecca of some of the best hash makers at the time, bringing their wares to Amsterdam to truly show David and Rob their wares and see if the royalty approved of their attempts at awesomeness. And it was incredible to sit there, and we would all go through these samples and hit the hubbly bubbly, and it was an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah, that was really fun. That was Marcus Bubbleman Richardson was also in on that from the beginning, and that was fun. We did it in the Artiste Lebanese restaurant. The owner's wife was a smoker, actually. We found out later, but they didn't care. I mean, what we were good customers there, and if we wanted to have an event, we could have one. We used to smoke in their restaurant too, and if anybody complained, they'd say, "Sorry, these guys have been coming here for years." And then when the licenses came around that you couldn't smoke tobacco, only tobacco, no smoking,
only
tobacco in restaurants, then the envelope really got pushed. You could still smoke there, and a couple of Indian restaurants we used to go to.
Swag it.
But places where, they walk over and go, "This is okay to smoke." And people would say, "We want to smoke cigarettes." They said, "No, you have to go outside."
Well, can I bring this up about us winning?
That's
Yeah,
the way
of
it went.
course.
It was
So
good.
30 years ago when I lived in Amsterdam, there was smoking signs, no smoking, no tobacco. And I got into it with a woman on the first class train once because I was smoking my joint. She was smoking her cigarettes. She wanted the train attendant who was checking tickets to tell me to put mine out while she hypocritically sat there smoking. Well, ironically now, it's legal to smoke cannabis indoors, but it's illegal to smoke tobacco indoors. So in a lot of ways, we have one because, the Dutch being an understanding and scientific-based society more than we are, they looked at the facts and went, oh, tobacco bad, cannabis not so bad. You can do that indoors, but not that one. That one's going to make you sick, cause cancer.
Very logical.
The indoor rulings came from the Restaurant Workers Union, and they were against cigarettes. They never asked the law
About
to
cannabis.
be changed for cannabis. So.
I'll ask you this. Do you think we'll ever truly preserve the global genetic diversity of cannabis, or have we lost too much already?
We'll never have it all back that we've lost, that's for sure. But there's really a lot out there still. I'm amazed by what land races are available. Land races are farmers' varieties, is probably the best way to describe them, but they're maintained by local farmers, usually on a population, but sometimes single plant selection basis, or a group of single plant selections is most likely. And that really does preserve a population structure that preserves all the genetic combinations within that population. So a lot of land races and feral populations are still around and available, and it would be hard for one person to go collect lots of them. But if you look at the different landrace companies and sort of landrace derivative companies, people who've taken a landrace and crossed it with skunk or something else that's a well-known crossing partner, taking one step, another beginning step towards making your own variety, or the original landraces, they're available from more than 50 countries at the moment, and you only have to look at less than 5 companies.
But dear sir, if I didn't read correctly in Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany, you kind of somewhat make the argument that there are no true land races, that it's all escaped cultivars from
I make
human
the argument that there's no wild populations.
wild populations.
No,
Okay.
land races are abundant. Wild populations
Could you define the difference between the two, please?
Wild populations would be a form of what I term self-sown populations. They drop seeds in the autumn, and seeds come up in the spring, and then it all happens again.
Wouldn't like Midwest be?
They're
point?
feral plants. They're self-sown populations. Yep, but they're feral. We know from their history they're not native.
No, sir.
You can't say they're wild.
But they are camp followers.
Yeah, but they followed railroad tracks and
Settlers.
and barnyards and everywhere else, and farm fields, wherever they could find
Well,
nutrients, water,
canvas-covered
and sunlight.
wagons and ropes, right? They needed hemp.
Yeah, but it basically came from commercial production. There's introductions into the Kentucky, Mississippi River Valley, Ohio River valleys, and also in the north, the Great Lakes regions and southwest of there. So
Would you consider those wild now, though? Because it's been
I consider them feral populations
Feral
that
populations.
escaped from cultivation.
okay.
But they're self-sown, just like a truly wild population would be. Ruderalis was the species name given to self-sown populations assumed to be wild, at least the first plants that were found that were called Ruderalis.
Very
So
cool.
that got to be the name for all little scrawny, undomesticated, not really used for anything, self-sown populations.
Would Vanola initial sessions be considered ruderalis?
No, possibly, but it depends on which taxonomist you talk to. But you could definitely say that they're self-sown populations.
What would you?
Probably not escapes, because I don't have any history for people growing hemp there, but they could even have been a wild population, but they're certainly self-sown.
What category would you put Vanola into then?
Finola, I would say it's an improved Wild variety. Wild
NLH?
Approved feral population. Narrow leaf hemp? Yes.
Yeah, NLH.
Yeah. That's European hemp in general.
Okay.
But what the taxonomy market I came up with, which is based largely on work done by Carl Hillig at Indiana University in his doctoral work with Paul Malberg's lab. We try to base, everybody's always wanted to have a practical taxonomy. And I'm not a taxonomist, but I, like other people who have made ventures into taxonomy, have come up with systems that match the data set they had, pretty much. And nobody agrees. And if everybody wants to call it all cannabis sativa, great, fine. But it's highly subdivided group. And however you want to classify those subdivisions, that's where we get into trouble. Some people say it's so diverse that we need to have separate species, up to 3. Other people say it's all one species with different subdivisions. But the subdivisions to me are what's important, no matter how you group them above that. And I look at it, always have looked at it more genomically. What gene pools are we dealing with? Throughout time, what do we have? What gene pools do we have that led to what we have today? So that's the approach we've taken. I won't get into all the details. It's there in Cannabis Evolution and Ethnobotany. And some groups have actually used the BLH, NLD, BLD terminology. Hasn't really caught on. But if you look at all the genomics research that's been done in the last 12 years, all it does is corroborate that there are 4 basic gene pools, 3 or 4, depending on how you divide them. And nobody refutes that at all. They just continue to make that more certain and then interpret it in their own ways. But nobody's come along and say, no, it's all divided up a different way, which would be fine too. They just would have better tools to dice the pie, but it's interesting to see. And I think it's just a practical, for want of a better word, way to look at the cannabis diversity. And
interesting.
That's why we've done it that way.
Have you run into all your travels a couple strains that stood out to you as like very unique genetics, something that you were like, wow, this really needs to be preserved, or this is something very unique? Because you've seen so much.
Every population has something about it that's interesting. But of the ones that have been reassorted, the drug land races that have been reassorted, there's been combinations that really stuck out to me. I've always liked the haze lines and everything that came from. And because of that, high terpenoline varieties that also came from things like Durban, South Africa, and terpenoline didn't just come from haze, but that's probably the first place it was captured. Who knows exactly where in its lineage it came from, but it was early on, probably Mexican or Colombian, but wasn't there. Don't know for sure. But that just suits my my person, I guess I'd say. I like.
Let me ask this.
Cannabis that makes you think a lot, I think.
It does. It makes you think a ton. If I could ask both of you something, because Todd, you have your experiences, and Robert, you as well. If there's one piece of advice you could whisper to new breeders and guys in cannabis right now, what would it be?
Try new things. Don't just keep reshuffling the same deck. Add a few cards.
My advice would be that, these guys coming along with lab coats and PhDs thinking they're going to improve upon, something the culture really accepted, if you will, is it's about quality and not quantity. It's not about numbers. It's about, do you like it? Does it feel good? And I really wish we would get back to growing cannabis that was high quality and the best human experience, not necessarily the highest THC, not necessarily the fastest flowering, not necessarily the heaviest yielding, but the best for floral experience, palate experience, even mental experience. Because I think that's been a bit lost along the lines where people have been, trying to crop out fast, trying to crop out heavy, not really caring about what you're seeing, which is this loss of diversity in terpenes. And, my mom used to talk about when she was getting, weed in the late 60s and the early 70s, it was very much from all these different places, and it made her feel different. And then, by basically the 90s, she felt that it was all the same. Like it lost that like, it just didn't have, there was more of a diversity in the varieties you got. By the 90s, she said it felt like everything was just so similar. Yeah. And I kind of got what she meant, because what was available to her, she wasn't a grower, was just what was on the market. And that was driven by what people could flip and sell and grow fast. And it wasn't import anymore, because in the 60s, a lot of the stuff that was coming in was from various countries, Vietnam, Laos, or, Cambodia or Colombia, or Mexico or Jamaica or Southern India, or it was a lot of tropical places. And then it shocks me a little bit that you didn't start seeing Afghans till the late 70s. And I guess that's because the hippies started coming back from the hippie trail and bringing with them this kind of stuff. And it really changed the face of cannabis on a lot of levels, I think, with...
What was the most important single thing that happened to Sinsemilla?
Afghan.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Sure. And what specifically about it? Just that in general, that region?
Well, if you look at Haze as a great example, Haze is the first hybrid in modern cannabis. It was bred in Santa Cruz in 1969, according to Skunkman. His neighbor G came up with it. He outcrossed it each year, all but losing it by the late 70s, he explained to me. But initially, it was a three-way Colombian, and then they mixed it with something in 70, mixed it again in 71. But it wasn't until really David released Skunk One in 76 that there was this two-part tropical, which was for him. Skunk One started off as Afghan crossed with a Colombian gold, and then that plant would be crossed later with an Acapulco gold. And that would be the plant we know now as Skunk One. But what happened is original Haze would come down in Santa Cruz late November, if you're lucky. And then he comes along with this 1-part Afghan, 2-part tropical that comes down late August, early September, and transforms the whole thing. Because then it also was, Rob has referred to it, if I'm not incorrect, as a relatively true breeding variety.
Skunk was, it's always been pretty consistent from seed.
Yeah.
There were different phenos, largely just in flower forms and things, but otherwise it had good agronomic traits. It was a little bit later than everybody wanted, of course, but just a little bit. It's like, now it's considered fast enough still. I mean,
it's one of my best-selling
at the time,
varieties.
people already wished that they had something that was faster, but
crazy.
It's been really consistent.
Changed everything.
And its terpene profile also, it's in a lot of things for a couple of reasons. It's a founder as well, but largely because it got used, the male especially got used so much by Dutch seed companies. So, who's your daddy, as Adam Dunn said years
Adam's
ago.
joke was always, who's your daddy? Skunk One's red.
Yeah,
it's relative of red.
Yeah, and your daddy's half of you, but everybody always names things after the ladies because they gave the seeds. So, you're all through time you've been getting half what you think you're buying and half the daddy. So now it's different. We have selfing. Now we have a different kind of variation and we have a different thing going on. But that was the way it was back then.
Cultivators, under canopy lighting is changing the game. And with that, Faven Under Canopy Lighting. They're one of our premier sponsors, and it's a brand we truly believe in. If you want to check out favenlighting.com, you can get all the answers to what Under Canopy is and how it's changing the game. And guess what? You're family, so we hook you up. The code is FSOTD, and you get hooked up with Faven Lighting. They put together a full layout of how you would set your facility or grow room up using their Under Canopy lighting. Whether you're using CMH, double-ended, fluorescents, LEDs, it doesn't matter. Faven Lighting has you covered. Go to favenlighting.com, use the code FSOTD, get hooked up, and change your grow game. Come on, cultivators.
Why do you think some of the biggest varieties of cannabis, and I'm talking hype, not just from science, have been from bag seeds? Have been literally from like you talk about S1s and selfs. I mean, we can talk about the gelato varieties, the cookies. We can go back to probably Skittles.
We can go back further.
I mean, we
OG Kush was
and it's like, it's this weird thing of like, even one of my varieties, Fruity Pebbles, is like, people love it. And I'm like, is it the original? I'm like, no, it was a bag seed. And it's just something about it is better than the original. And it's like sometimes you get these, I don't know, what is it about that?
Better than the original, I guess, would just be luck, like any cross. But
okay.
Not every plant that comes from a self female is identical. They're just much more similar than they would have been otherwise. But
is it tapping into grandpa and grandma at that point, or what is it tapping into when you're selfing it? Are you going to see diversity of like more mom, more dad?
Both. Segregation is what you're going to see.
Yeah, you get the same. You just get more homozygous combinations. You get more homozygous dominant or recessive traits out of it. So the more you self, the more homozygous you get. Also, the more vigor you lose and other problems. But you can't self forever.
It's interesting because we ask like, well, what made Skittles? And no one will tell us. You know, it's very mystique. And then you say, well, what are the mom and dad? And it's the same thing if we ask about cookies. The strain cookies, forum cut, animal. There's a lot of mystery behind, and some people that do know, it's like, oh, well, it was this, or it's a bag seed of this.
Well, what's
the
interesting,
names have been changed to protect the guilty.
Exactly.
So obfuscation is the key to marketing, and if look at the people who tried to claim Sour D, everybody knows it came from Hal, who knew how, but everybody else has tried to claim it. That's another foundational one. Now considered, cracks me up, a great example of more sativa varieties. I mean, come on, you guys. Sativa compared to what?
Right.
You know.
Not compared to haze.
You haven't tried a haze, have you?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, so it's indica back to that, Afghan, Pakistani, wherever it came from. It's the same gene pool. It's a broadleaf drug, broad leaflet drug, BLD thing.
Could I say this, though? You know, I think there's a lot of confusion that people seem to think that all narrow leaf drug varieties are haze, and it's not true. All haze is a narrow leaf drug variety, but not all narrow leaf drug varieties have any relation to haze or have the smell or the taste or the high.
No, it was just bred originally from 2 narrow leaf drug varieties, and then a third. I mean, you had Colombian, Mexican, and Thai.
David
Never
said
had
it was
Afghan
Colombian,
in it.
Colombian,
It's
Colombian.
pre-Afghan.
Initially, David said it was a 3-way Colombian in 69. That's what he's
Yeah,
telling
that's
me.
fine. But that's initially where it started. But Mexican was crossed in, and then
Yes.
Thai, and then by the very end, South Indian.
Oh, wow.
But every time a new daddy came in, it was half your daddy. It was half your daddy was half the program.
Which washes away the spicy awesomeness of the original combination.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what
And
he
you
said
can
to me.
still select those from the seeds you get. They're still in there, some of them.
Well, the ones he said, you know, the one thing that David really impressed upon me was don't lose what you start with. You know, sure, select, outcross, cut your moms, make your clones, but don't lose what you start with, because what he felt like his neighbors did was, you know, him being a seed saver and a seed trader, when he got he looked at it as renditions, like the 69 rendition, the 70 rendition, the 71 rendition. He liked the first one, so he saved the first one. When I went up to your friend and asked him, was it the 2012 Cannabis Culture Awards when I was getting that award with Branson, I asked David if he'd please sell me original haze seeds. He laughed at me. He said, I don't sell original haze seeds. And then he said, I think you want the seeds I save for myself and I won't sell it to anybody. I was like, oh yeah, those are the ones I need. And that's where I got the original haze seeds from. And he explained to me that he tried to not to influence it because he liked it the way he found it, that he did, you know, use tens of thousands of plants to open pollinate and reproduce the seeds by the kilo. But he liked the segregation that was in it because then he could go through it, find the one he liked, and then use that for breeding. And it's a fascinating study, and I think a lot of people lose that idea that, hey, let's keep the primary color, let's play with it and make secondary and tertiary colors, but let's not forget where we started. And a lot of these others, they don't get that, you know. And I think a lot of why a lot of the modern cannabis becomes so homogenous is because a lot of these seed companies, you know, see these guys in these aficionado videos blowing pollen on plants in the middle of a field, thinking that it's not going to cross-pollinate what's next to it. And then by the time people grow their seeds out, they all are very similar because they're sitting there mixing them all up. And to me, I hate that. Like every time I've produced my seeds every year, there's only one male in the house. There's only one daddy going. Yeah. There's never going to be a cross contamination. There's never going to be a question. And I think we need to keep things segregated, and nothing against, Chihuahuas and Dobermans and Great Danes, but I like them being different. Like nothing, everything doesn't have to be a mutt. And that's what we've kind of got in modern cannabis. Like everything's under 9 weeks, everything's similar, everything is, it breaks my heart, to be quite honest. And I hope people do go back to the building blocks and reimagine these things and start selecting for quality instead of speed and quantity.
We haven't blown it we completely yet. I mean, we still have the basic building blocks. We still have land races, more choices than ever, to be honest with you, and more diversity. Now, you can't go back and get a seed out of a bale of 1970s Colombian, but there's still other really cool stuff you can work with, and it's readily available and easy to procure. So
probably easier now than ever through the internet and through, especially really more than anything, Instagram land. I mean, I look at all these pages, I follow half of them where I'm going, holy shit, look at the field. You can see what's going on. Yeah. We recently had Skunkman Sam pass away. Someone that I wish we could have gotten on here and just had him explain like his journey, because what a unique one. Can I ask you guys both, because I heard you were very close with him. You guys were best friends. And Todd, this is someone Todd very much looked up to, because I could tell just by the way when you talk about him, how much reverence you have towards him. Could you kind of talk about his impact a little bit on cannabis, on modern day cannabis as we know it?
He is probably, for any single person, been the most impactful. I mean, without David.
The single person.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, he's covered more bases, especially if you look at hemp and hemp fiber and grain, the cannabis plant in general, but especially drug side, of course. But
through meaning, and let me ask this, and this is just coming from a naive place, is you mean through his travels and his breeding or his preservation or his connections of putting people together, or all of it as one? Because there's so much he accomplished.
Well, especially distributing good varieties to start with. I mean, that's the biologically the most lasting contribution. But basically just asking good questions. And as Ryan Lee and other people have said who knew David well, he was never afraid to talk to people. He always had questions, but he was never afraid to just confront people. We used to go to the International Cannabis Research Society meetings. And the next year, the year after, they changed it to the International Cannabinoid Research Society meeting. But it didn't stop us from going. But yeah, that was always, almost every year at the beginning at least, we were there trying to always cross things up, be the liaison for the community. Those people were chemists. Okay, and a few piss testers in the early days too, but they were not botanists. I gave a talk one time about cannabis pests. First of all, it was the first time many people had ever seen a picture of a cannabis plant. A couple of young Indian postdocs came up to me after the talk and said, thank you so much. We never knew till now that THC came from a plant. We've just been using it from a little bottle and giving it to rats, something like that. And they were like,
no,
thank you. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, I believe
I'm serious. People get so far down their rabbit hole with science that they don't look around them very much. A lot of scientists are like that. So it's fun to go to meetings and cross things up, and just say, yeah, here's another side of this plant. It's fun to go to a cannabinoid science meeting and do something about fiber hemp.
And
just
this
to broaden things a bit.
What I think makes David's career so, in from my perspective, truly amazing. Because if I were to say what I think makes his whole life and his career with cannabis so special, is it goes all the way back to him falling in love with his wife Diana, and they sold all their worldly possessions, as he told me, and they flew to London, and then they hitchhiked to Morocco because a hippie needs hash. And then they went from Morocco to Germany. And then they hitchhiked from Germany all the way across to India through Afghanistan. They showed me invitations in Nepal where they went to dinners at Eden Hash Center and such. And I get to sit in his living room, go through his old scrapbooks. And And that's where he started collecting seeds. And he was already in love with cannabis, there's no question. But it was when he was in India, he lived there for over a year. They started import-export business with fabrics, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. And he lived there for almost a year, mostly naked by the beach in Goa. And that's where he discovered narrow leaf, indica, which it's in India. It's 100% Indian, it's indica from India, but it's narrow leaf drug varieties. And when he went home, instead of moving back to Hollywood, which is where he grew up, and went to Hollywood High, he moved to Santa Cruz. And he fortunately moved on a street with not just the breeder of what we call Hayes, his surfer friend G, but down the street was the gentleman that made the Encyclopedia of Psychedelics. And he was also the publisher. Peter Stafford. He also was the publisher of a magazine about LSD called Blotter. And David wrote his first article about breeding, which was very long, probably 9 pages. And he was trying to explain to his hippie friends how to turn these land races into good shit. And as he did with Skunkman. And I'll show you a copy of it upstairs. It's quite intricate. And I would challenge anyone who considers themselves a breeder today to read this and not tell me that some of it doesn't fly right over your head. And this was David in his 20s. And that was first released in 1979. And he gives a little shout out to Mr. Clarke in his upcoming book, Cannabis Botany, he calls it. And then what's really fascinating is that I was good friends with Dr. Todd McCormick, and Dr. Todd McCormick was out of Berkeley, and he called me 2D, I called him 1D, we were best friends. And he had met David Watson in the 70s in Santa Cruz when he was doing this biofeedback testing, and David blew the little meter off its schedule, and he was enamored with this guy, and they became good friends. And David started studying Roxanne Labs because they were moving synthetic THC through the regulatory process in what became Marinol, released in 1985-6. And David saw an opportunity to make generic equivalent of Marinol, THC, from a natural plant, and he basically figured out that he could start his own pharmaceutical company in the Netherlands. So he moved his whole family there in 1984 so that he could start literally something that no one else had in the world. And then when the first thing he did was he hired the world's best marijuana botanist who had quite the resume to come work with him, and that would be Robert Clarke.
Wow.
And they pursued cannabinoid and terpene research before, this was in the 80s. David bought shares in Roxanne Labs so he could get the insider trading information about how they were moving it through the regulatory process, so he could get insider information.
As a stockholder.
Yes, he did. And then it gets even better. He started the International Hemp Association while he was doing Hortifarm in the early 90s to try to re-educate the world about the whole cannabis plant, not just the dope, not just the rope, but all of it, which was really quite incredible. And then on top of that, he was this mysterious breeder. And, back then, I did 5 years in prison. Nobody should go to prison for cannabis, man. It's pretty fucked up. But at the same time, he didn't want to go to prison for cannabis, which is why he used a fake name because, he had a wife and 2 kids, 2 girls that are grown up to being, one's a rocket scientist, and phenomenal humans. And he wanted to protect them like a good dad should. So when he initially moved to Amsterdam, he used the fake name. His acid tripping nickname was Jingles because he was this big guy. He used to wear a little jester's hat and jingle his bells when he was tripping at parties. So people called him Jingles. So then when he released the weed, they called him Sam, for Skunkman Sam. So he called himself Sam Selnage, which was Jingles backwards, and he got there and confused people, but he started selling seeds by the kilo to all these upstarts. So a lot of people think that he went out there to meet Neville to sell Neville seeds. No, Neville was just a stop on the road. He was already out there to work with Bernard Brunning and what they called the Green Team. Bernard went on to found Positronics, where I worked in 96 for a year. Bernard was an incredible activist, not just a businessman, but he had a real passion for trying to educate people about the wonders of cannabis. He had a little mini mall of marijuana in Amsterdam. Bernard was my hero when I met him. And he was working with an old man named Old Ed Holloway, who was literally a fucking rocket scientist who worked on the the project to break the speed of sound out of Edwards Air Force Base, and then he went on to a lifetime of career cultivation. And he was one of the people that got seeds from David in early '83, and then grew them in the summer of '83, loved them, and then got David to come out in the early '84 to join their green team. And that's when he was out there. He sold some seeds to Neville. That made Neville famous, because people don't realize this, but the Holland Seed Bank was started with Skunk One, Hindu Kush that David found, things like Early Girl, Early Pearl, Indie Sat. All of this came from David. California Orange, David, again, he started the world's first cannabis seed company when he came back, called Sacred Seeds. And people seemed to think it was a collective, but it wasn't. It was him and his wife. And then when they moved to Amsterdam, they turned it into Cultivator's Choice and started making the seeds by the kilo and selling them to everyone that was now starting up. SSS Seeds, Ben's Sensi Seed Club, all of them were buying seeds from David as Skunkman Sam or Sam Selnage, and they started reselling them. So he was really responsible for really building the base for the market of all these good genetics. And I was sitting cutting clones with old Ed Holloway at Positronics one day, and he was telling me stories of David, and he cut a branch and he had his clone, and I asked him, what did you do with the genetics you had before David came? He looked at me, threw it over his shoulder, and he cut another print. I was like, really? He goes, nothing was like what David had. What David had was, it was really, Todd, it was incredible. It was diverse. It was well done. It was what we have now. And when you think about Positronics, what they were basically reselling, their Calio, their original haze, the Tom Hill haze, he just stopped by Posi and bought a pack of seeds. That's all Tom did. Brought it home, named it after himself. That's it. But it was really just Bernard reproducing the seeds that he got from David and Sacred Seeds, Cultivator's Choice, and that became the staples of all the Dutch genetics. And then he turned his head on hortifarm. And what I think was hard on you gentlemen when I was living there, because I was the editor-in-chief of a magazine at the time, so I was hearing everybody's friggin' stories. They didn't understand what you guys were doing, man. And you guys being a pharmaceutical research company, unfortunately, what he's saying about the cannabis industry now, they were experiencing then, it was nobody's business. Nobody would have understood what they were saying about minor cannabinoids and medical utility and terpenes, and modulation was over everybody's head. They were just buying seeds from these guys. And that really was the distance between the two. I was writing an article called Ants Under the Skyscraper, and no disrespect to the Dutch seed merchants, but I felt like they were like ants under the skyscraper that you guys built, not being able to comprehend what was happening in the penthouse, because they were down there with their little seed sales thinking they were doing big shit. And these guys were up here trying to figure out the world economy, the future of medical cannabis and cannabinoids, and then sending you off to damn near every country in the world where you could collect genetics. People don't realize this, but I miss very much, Rob, your yearly travels, because he used to send me a summary of all the cool things he did all year. And I'd sit there reading your emails around Christmas thinking, I got to get out of the house.
Based on, Rob, on chasing down genetics or researching genetics, or what specifically?
No, I spent a lot of time not collecting genetics so much as collecting photos and stories and textiles. I have a very large hemp textile collection, largely built from Asia, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and most of Southeast Asia, but primarily China and Southwest China, but many parts of China.
Interesting.
And that became a real interest for me. I had hortifarm where I could legally do what I wanted to do with the drug side of the cannabis plant, and also a springboard to do the hemp side of things. And yeah, it kept me out of trouble, for one thing. So
do you think breeders and growers have any type of responsibility towards the plant to do the right thing, to breed back into, any of this?
Well, you have to separate growers from breeders before you can answer that question. And that's almost impossible to do. Because as you might have pointed out earlier tonight, or earlier today at least, most growers that are serious these days do some kind of breeding. And all of them do some kind of selection, even if they didn't breed it. So it's that hard, big a step to, especially these days, with being able to self your female selection. Then, I'm not sure I'd call that breeding, but everybody's busy making seeds. Let's put it that way.
I like that.
I encourage people that buy my seeds to make their own combinations, and the whole goal is find something you like, because it's really a personal experience that you're going through. And you know, a lot of people, it's like winning the lottery. When you're saying about bag seeds, you know, maybe you get lucky. You go in that little 7-Eleven, you walk out with your little dollar ticket and you win $1 million, you know, and it happens where, think of how many seeds have been lost by people who didn't bother to grow that seed in the bag. And I know it sounds weird, but I look at all the seeds and I think all seeds are optimists, you know, and there's incredible potential in all of them. And none of them are bad if they do something you like, you know. And I tell my friends that grow and my customer base, which is pretty big these days, don't judge a book by how it grows. You know, if we did, the world wouldn't know OG Kush, for instance, because it kind of grows like shit. It's lanky. It doesn't yield that great. It's kind of finicky.
Long internode spacing.
Oh, I could list a whole bunch of issues with it, but it smokes really good. And I once asked this man, how do you select the varieties when you're doing your selections? He said, real easy, Todd. I flower it, I dry it, I put it in a baggie, and whichever one I smoke first wins. That's what he told me. And I was like, that's genius.
Smokability
because at the end of the point, that's the whole point of it. And for people that are growing, you can get the plant to produce anywhere from 10 grams to 10 pounds if you pre-grow it and you understand it's pre-grow and you put it in a big enough container under the right circumstances. I mean, my friends in Northern California, it took a while for them to get convinced to go from seed to clone, because they used to argue that a clone could never grow as big as a seed plant. And then they started pre-growing these things between December and May 15th, putting them in 300-gallon smart pots and letting them go nuts, and they would be 20 to 30 feet tall. And it's all about the pre-grow and understanding that. So if you understand what the plant's going to do, you can get it to yield any amount that you want. And I wish people would start selecting more for quality rather than convenience. One of the reasons I hate autoflower so much, and I brought this up earlier, is because it breaks my heart that people are dumping hemp genetics onto good quality cannabis, because for a long time, a lot of us disregarded anything that wasn't the best quality. So now we're compromising quality for convenience, because a bunch of people don't know that if you stick a cannabis plant under 12 hours of light, it's going to automatically flower. I mean, come on. The whole planet automatically flowers between the summer solstice and pretty much May 1st. That's all autoflower time for those watching. The only time it's like a mother room is between May 15th and June 20th, pretty much, when you got the spring type vibe. And a lot of people don't recognize this, and you can start regular seeds under 12 hours of light and they will automatically flower, and you'll have high quality cannabis. So I think that it's a hustle that they're selling people these seeds, because you can't mother them, you can't clone them. You'll never have an OG Kush auto because you can't keep it like that. Nope. So it's a waste of time.
Valuable for guerrilla growers who live north of 40 degrees or south of 40 degrees. This single trait expanded the range of drug cannabis significantly, the outdoor range. Indoor range didn't matter. In fact, indoors, they're kind of a pain in the butt, but
huge,
you know, but for outdoors, if you just want to stick them in the ground and walk away and come back, all female, auto flowering. Come on, man. That's a clone and a bean right there.
But over 40 degrees north?
Yeah,
so you mean Canada?
Canada and north.
Or under 40,
Scandinavia, northern
the other
Russia,
way down, but who do you know hangs out under the 40
northern Japan.
South?
Well, there's not so much landmass south of 40 degrees, but I mean, you've got Tasmania, all of the south of...
Part of Australia, maybe even,
right?
You
got plenty of southern Australia, at least.
Yeah. I guess my question then would be, it's interesting.
Plenty of parts of the northern world, but still the vast majority of the people on Earth live in the belt where it's quite easy to grow outdoors.
It's funny, right? Plants are like
range.
people. People are like plants a little bit.
There are a lot of it. You know, I tell people all the time, every cannabis plant is unique if you look close enough, because none of them are going to have the same terpene and the same cannabinoid levels from sister to sister, brother to brother. They're all going to have slight variations.
They vary less, but they still vary.
First Smoke family, we're here talking to cultivators globally about drip hydro, and we're hearing their experience with it. Let's tune into some other First Smoke family and hear their experience with drip hydro newts.
I've had issues in the past with other brands kind of clogging up the emitters, especially this time of year at the end of season. We haven't seen any of that, no clogged emitters. I think the stack though with the drip has been a lot better. When I'm testing the runoff, I'm just going off the drip chart. Everything's coming out exactly on the EC that's shown on the chart. So that helps. It's just a lot more efficient with time.
I've ran probably every single nutrient that's on a hydro store shelf, tried a product or an additive or something of that. But bringing drip into here, it's night and day.
I am like shocked on how well the drip is working across the board. And I'm impressed that everything has expressed himself in this way. I mean, everything looks so healthy. This is the next level of nutrients.
Quick heads up for all my growers, consultants, and content creators out there. Drip Hydro just launched their affiliate referral program. If you're already putting people onto a solid nutrient, now you can actually get paid for it. You refer commercial growers to Drip, they make a purchase, you earn 3% commission on every sale. Real money, no gimmicks. And Drip's not just about the referrals, they're building with the community. Think content collabs, co-branded campaigns, visibility for your brand, your work, and your name. Sound like something you're into? Drip Hydro. Feed your fire with Drip nutrients, in-store or online. Grow generation, Drip Hydro. So interesting. Is there another species of plant that you would compare to cannabis? It's a two-part question, because the other part is, do you think there's a dark side of the moon to cannabis? Is there something in the cannabis plant we haven't even touched the research on or haven't even gotten into that you think is like a, whoa, we could find gold over here?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if the cannabis plant gives us something we can't predict and don't expect. But
well,
yeah.
I'm gonna answer that question, guys. I think it's a combination. So I was high one night in 1997 on Marinol, and I looked at it and I thought, synthetic molecules suspended in sesame oil, encapsulated in gelatin, because that's Marinol. And I was high, and I'd used an AB epoxy that day, and I thought to myself, whoa, what if Mother Nature gave me the AB epoxy in cannabis? So I went and, thanks to him, scooped up a bunch of my resin glands from one of my big sieves, and I dumped it into a frying pan, put some hemp seed oil in it, heated it up, and immediately realized that all the dry resin powder dissolved away into the oil, because oil and oil, wax and oil, same thing. And then I put it on a piece of bread. I got really ripped, and then tried it again, got really, really ripped. And then I started putting it in a jar, in the refrigerator, in a mason jar, and watching the trichromes, takes about a week to 10 days, or 2 weeks, dissolve away. So the little glands will stay, because they're a harder, denser, waxy material, but the trichrome heads, they will dissolve away first. And if you put it in the hemp seed oil, what you're really getting, because there's a lot of people that call cannabis that is just cannabinoids, fully extracted cannabinoids, and so they're bullshit. It's not the whole thing of cannabis, because if cannabis was approaching you with all her healing powers, in one hand is her trichrome with her cannabinoids and her terpenes, but in the other hand is her seed with a complex digestible protein and a perfect balance of linoleic and linolenic acids, which are the two essential acids that our bodies need to fucking maintain itself. So W6 and W3. W6 is the inflammatory fatty acid, and it's found in everything. It's why people say that seeds and seed nuts and seed oils are so bad for us. And it's why the Western diet's so bad, because we're supposed to have it in a 3-to-1 ratio. We get it in more like a 10 to 20 to 1 ratio, which is why most of the foods we eat are inflammatory. And I was schooled on this because I was the editor of Jack Herer book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and we have a whole chapter on hemp seed nutrition in it. And when I realized that you can start using hemp seed oil and actually balancing out your whole system, because the EFAs are such an important element. What takes it even further is that now the science, since about 2015, is showing us that W6 is a precursor to AEA, which stands for anandamide. Ananda is one word, amide is another. Ananda means bliss, and amide means internal. So when they were naming this neurotransmitter that mimics THC in our bodies, they named it internal bliss, which is really cool. And when it's created by our bodies, it's an endocannabinoid. When it's created by a plant, it's a phytocannabinoid. But at the same time, THC, anandamide, they swim to the same CB1 receptor, CB2 to a lesser degree, and they turn and they make you happy, horny, hungry, whatever, pain relief, you name it. They do the same things. And this is why we're working on a new book called From Cancer to Cannabis, The Essential Guide to the Endocannabinoid System, but trying to explain people that if you really want to make your own medicine, you can take hemp seed oil, you can take your cannabis, you can grind it up, put it in there, stick it in your fridge, let it soak, and then strain away the vegetable material from the oil, and now you're going to get phytocannabinoid and terpene enriched hemp seed oil.
What's that do?
Well, all of the anti-inflammatory things that cannabinoids do, because not only are you getting the cannabinoids that are anti-inflammatory and good for balance and creating homeostasis within your body, that's the whole point of the endocannabinoid system, you're also going to get from it the cannabinoids, because hemp seed oil does not have any cannabinoids in it. And cannabinoid oil, sometimes they refer to as hemp oil, which is a huge misnomer, does not have any essential fatty acids in it. So they're two very different oils that Mother Nature has given us in the same plant. And the fact that we can combine them and that we can make our own medicine in our refrigerator without any heat. I tell people, look, don't, Rick Simpson oil is kind of a joke. In the book that you looked at, remember how you tripped on, it has an ethanol extract. Oh, I hate to say it, but that's all Rick Simpson oil is, an ethanol extract that goes back to the invention of cannabis. That was just basically alcohol, boil it off, you get this goo. That's the beginning of us calling it cannabis. The first cannabinoid was called cannabis, if I'm not mistaken. And this is how we started all with an extraction process.
I have a bottle of cannabis at our studio. I bought off the eBay, original bottle, a couple $100 or whatever. It was it's an old bottle of cannabis, that they used back in the day, I guess.
Yes, and it was an alcohol extraction, like described in that 19th century book that I brought up, showing you. Yes, and this is why, in a lot of ways, we really learn that
students.
We are students. We need to learn about cannabinoids and the modulation of the terpenes to get a better understanding of this. And now throw in thiols into the conversation, which is also anti-cancerous, and it becomes a fascinating study. And to me, combining the essential fatty acids with the cannabinoids, I'm making the argument in my next book that cannabinoids should be considered more like a vitamin and a mineral in the way that it interacts with our endocannabinoid system, because our bodies mimic it. Like the way you make vitamin D naturally is similar to how you can eat it and get it through food. So you can make AEA naturally, or you can smoke a joint and get THC in your system as well.
It's like vitamin D.
And Dr. Lester Grinspoon used to dream about the day where we'd go in and we would get our ECS tested, and that he would be able to say, oh, you're just, low in a couple of these minor cannabinoids, and you take them off the shelf, give them those, balance you out, send you on your way. Because he felt like the endocannabinoid system, through his research, was really modulating so many different diseases in our course of being human. And I'm even taking it a step further and saying that prohibition caused a deficiency in cannabinoids to all of us. Because if you think about the fact that cannabis is not indigenous to the North American continent, that it was brought here by the Spanish that were settlers and the other settlers from Europe, they were bringing it and they were making fibers, and they were making their cloth, they were making their ropes out of it. Ben Franklin made a paper mill out of it, little things. Well, it was on all the farms. And just like animals eat things that are on the farms, they were picking up cannabinoids in minor levels, passing them off to us through our food. So we all had the THCA or CBDA or other minor cannabinoids in our food system until the 30s, when they taxed it out of existence, and suddenly all of our food was devoid of any cannabinoids, and we had no touch with it. Because there was a point in America where you couldn't walk into a household and not see cannabis somewhere. I mean, think about all the ways in which we used it industrially. I mean, the first laws in cannabis production were 1619, Jamestown, Virginia. You had to grow cannabis on 10% of your land, and you could even pay your taxes with it because they needed it for their own infrastructure.
So what ruined it? Money?
Greed.
Yeah. It seems like when we talk about genetics and the loss of genetics, it boils down to money. When we talk about the research and why we're not doing enough research in cannabis, it comes down to money. When we talk about where the industry's going and the issues we're having, it boils down to money. All these roots of evil, this stuff that pulls the industry this way and tugs it the other way, and us certain people trying to just keep it on track or keep it out of the hands, it feels like, of the wrong people. We just saw Michigan raise taxes 24% overnight. Pretty crazy. And it's like,
do with AG.
And it just goes to like, that's why I asked you about, do you think we're winning or losing? I guess this would be my question then to both you gentlemen. What's the legacy you want to leave behind in cannabis?
I wouldn't know what I knew if it wasn't for people like Rob sitting down and explaining it to me, and I'm very grateful for all the time you've given me. Robert, I feel accomplished reading your books, never mind the idea that I could write your book. So thank you for being our professor. For me, as a little kid, I just had cancer. I didn't think I was going to become an adult, and I've lived my life a little loose, you could say. And because I didn't think I was going to live that long. And, I just hope to help other people. When I was a little kid, I saw the hypocrisy of not wanting to tell other cancer patients it was a child that was bald that I was using marijuana. And I had an issue with my oncologist because I was like, you want me to lie? And he was like, I didn't tell you to lie. And I was like, well, you don't want me to talk about marijuana. And I was like, isn't that a lie by omission? And he was like, oh, and he brought me back to my mom. And my mom had to talk to me about how fucked up the planet is and how, she held up a pack of rolling Pampers. She said, what is this? I said, zigzags. She goes, no, you don't know what they are. You've never seen them before. Then she held up her bong. I said, she said, what's that? I said, it's your bong. No, you don't know what it is. You've never seen it before. Because if you say you know this stuff, they're going to take you away from me. They'll come arrest me and put you in jail. I was like, me? She was like, you'll go into a foster home. I'll never see you again. I was like, whoa, this is whack, lady. But you know what? This is what we all grew up under. And this is where that emancipate yourself comes from, because we really are responsible for almost outthinking the federal government. And we're getting to a point now where people don't believe in prohibition anymore. And that's really what we need to have happen. And I think a lot of that is, me trying to educate and others. I feel like I was just one spoke in a big wheel of change. You've been a much larger spoke, Rob, and I appreciate you. But, as someone who tried to help people out by writing books, wasn't working. I'd give people Jack's book, come back 6 months later, they didn't do shit, wouldn't read past the first page, broke my heart. So then I started making documentaries because, you sit grandma down in front of the movie for 2 hours, she'd come back saying they should legalize hemp. And this is where I feel like we kind of need to educate each other. That's why I support what you're doing so very much, because you're bringing this quality information to people that don't get to sit in a coffee shop with someone and over a beer or hash joint learn things that they don't already know. So you're bringing the education to people through experiences in ways that I think are absolutely beautiful. Because one of the things I loved about Amsterdam so much was being able to meet strangers, sit down, no paranoia, and start to shoot the shit and learn about where you came from and the things you've done and stuff you've grown, and get my socks blown off by it. And then that was a good feeling. And I think in cannabis, for me personally, culture is the new commodity. And that is going to be something that I think we all need to embrace, and if I have a legacy past my life, I just hope I brought more understanding to cannabis. I guess that's all I could hope for, inspired a few people along the way and passed out good genetics and got out, made it so that other people could experience what I've benefited from for so long, because I had no fear and I grew my own medicine, and now that people don't have the fear to grow their own medicine, I hope more people do.
I mean, that's a great answer. It's a lifelong journey, right? And we're trying to leave something behind for the next generation. Obviously, Robert, you've left so much education behind for the next generation to understand the plant more and then to utilize it as almost like a tool in a tool belt. What would be something you'd like to leave behind for them to, when they think about you?
Well, I'd like people to just realize that education's important. It's the same thing Todd's saying. I mean, the International Hemp Association, our journal, was dedicated to the advancement of cannabis through the dissemination of information. I mean, it's the same thing. It's many years later, but it's the same idea. There's still information to get out there. There's a lot that people don't understand. What I would like to see is cannabis give the world a deeper message that I think is quite timely. It's right now, things need to change. The world is increasingly faith-based, and we're decreasingly empirically based, scientifically based. And I don't think faith is a good basis for making judgments. I think science is a good basis for making judgments. Experiencing, and if you can't experience it yourself, trusting the experience. And maybe cannabis will work as a tool to lead people to having a little respect for science, and that it doesn't just belong to the white coats. And I hope this next book helps get that point across.
I'm looking forward to that. Todd, if there's one piece of information that Robert did that kind of rocked your world or opened up a door for you, would there be one specific piece of information or book that you'd say, man, this really changed life for me, or this opened up a door that other things didn't or couldn't?
It's funny because, Rob, One, I've had the pleasure of him being my friend for over 30 years, and I'm grateful for every minute I've had with you, Rob. But you've been one hell of a little whole, going Alice in Wonderland style. I fell down the hole of marijuana botany, and then I fell down the hole of hashish, and then he came out with hemp diseases and pests, and bugs were huge. And then when cannabis evolution ethnobotany came out, I mean, it's really been a tunnel and a half. And it's interesting because, like, I feel like I'm following him through the world and just reading the hieroglyphs he throws on the wall. And I get to, like, it blows my mind that you've been able to contemplate this and then put it out for the rest of us, common humans to digest, because I dare you, read the book. It's going to take you a minute. He sent me a pre-proof copy and then asked me, give me opinions on it. And I was like, I'll be right back in 10 years. And it was really quite incredible. So it's hard for me to point to one thing, because as a student of it, what I think they did with Hortifarm, phenomenal. What I think they did with the International Hemp Association, phenomenal. Really, and it was their accumulation of work that gave us hashish, because if I'm not mistaken, they had to throw away all of the research grade material that they made from Hortifarm as part of their deal with Amsterdam. They didn't want them diverting it to the black market. So I hope I'm not wrong for saying this, they wanted to shake off anything that wasn't needed. So they processed it over screens before they threw it away. And that created all of the wonderful trichrome experiences that kind of created this wonderful book, I would think, because they always had the best freaking farmer's hash that you could imagine, because, why throw that away, right? And this is, to me, and then the genetics and the whole thing. I mean, your whole life, Rob, has been my literal Alice in Wonderland, holy shit moment, because, I mean, anybody who's a student of this wonderful plant, dude, you're the shit. I mean, Rob, you've really been absolutely,
North Star.
Yeah, the North Star is a beautiful way to put it, because you've been such a guiding light, not just with the botany, but through learning everything about, and then you bring us into world history, and oh my gosh, I don't believe, and yeah, I'm probably your biggest fanboy, but I don't believe anybody in cannabis has led a trail like you have. And then the books that you've put out, a lot of us get stoned along the path and we can't get shit done. You, on the other hand, you get stoned along the path and you poop out things like this one, where it just blows my mind. I mean, you sat around hand drawing these, it's just, you're very single. You're a diamond among us normal gems.
Well, teaching people to fish is the key, right? That's what he's doing. He's teaching the cannabis industry how to fish. Hey, here's an unbelievable amount of information about the plant. Use as you need, use as you will.
Yeah.
Dude, how many books are in print for 44 years without being changed? It's insane.
I mean, and every single grower that has done this for, let's say, a decade, which I think when you hit about 10 years in cannabis cultivation nonstop too, not spurts of it, but I mean, 10 years of this is what I do for a living, these start to come into play in your life. I think at that point it started stacking, and you started just being I need to know who these people are and where they're going to get all this information. And you start to, like you say, fall down the rabbit hole, or Alice in Wonderland it. And then some of this stuff goes over most people's heads. Robert, what would you say is, for guys that have a hard time digesting books, but love the plant, where should they start?
Well, one thing that's really, come on, of course, is the internet. I mean,
Audible.com too, even.
Yeah, and Audible books too. And I'm not an Audible books listener. I'm about to start with it, actually. I have so many friends who do it, but they do things like drive to work.
Yes.
They have that time.
I have business partners that's all they do is listen to Audible. But
and I get it. And I'll start doing it at some point. But
no, Rob, you're never going to start driving to work.
No, but maybe an audiobook.
That would be great.
My books should be available in audio form at some point. Never pursued doing that, but it wouldn't be a bad idea, especially for the new ones. But I like the form of books. I mean, I don't think they're outdated. I think they give you something as an experience that the internet doesn't give you. But my new book's not going to have citations. That book has 800 of them. I think this book had 100 or something where I started. But now that book took 17 years to write, but there's close to 800 citations in there. And you don't need to go to the library anymore. You could find 90% of those on the internet tonight if you want. So there's going to be a suggested reading list, and on it will be the new version of this book, which Todd mentioned.
Oh, really?
Hemp, Diseases, and Pests. This is John McPartland's book. And David and I helped him because we had practical experience that added to what he was doing already. But this is his book. And CABI, the Commonwealth Ag Bureau Incorporated? Anyway, the British Agriculture Press, their official agriculture press, is doing the second version.
Wow.
And I believe, if I have this right, it's a contributed volume. It's John and others who've contributed their more recent research. And David and I are not part of this new one. But this will be in my recommended reading. That's why I bring this up. And I'm glad it'll be out. It'll be out in a month or two. They're trying to finish it by the end of the month. We'll see. But it'll be there. And it'll have a lot of updates that are important to really figure out what you're doing with hemp, diseases, and pests. They change just like the industry changes. The pests have really changed too.
Can I ask you what you think of hops, latent viroid entering into the conversation in the past 10 years, and how has that had an effect on
I think
genetics
it's
worldwide?
created some pretty big ripples. I mean, people didn't like to find out that their old friends are sick and dying.
Or that the mom that I've been holding on to for 15 years now is sick, and you're telling me there's no way I can cure her either, really?
Yeah, well,
I got to run in front of her with TC and just keep running out, try to outrun it?
Well, that's about as... Remediation may have worked and it may have not, but the jury's still out. And in most cases, it hasn't.
Are you saying that tissue culture does not always get rid of the diseases and the viroids and viroids? It doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And even if it does, it doesn't necessarily give you back exactly the same plant. In fact, it's very unlikely you're going to get back the same plant.
Really?
Well, how does it change, may I ask?
From epigenetic changes. A lot goes on in that test tube to get rid of those bad
cells,
diseases.
Because of hormones or bad
hormone
stuff.
Treatments, whatever goes on by putting it in an unnatural environment. First of all, extremely sterile. And you're also taking away lots of beneficial.
That is so crazy he says this. I've heard from growers.
You're not going to get back the same thing.
That's what I've heard.
But there's lots of values for tissue culture.
How
Just
close,
don't try to get it to do it to resuscitate your 109-year-old grandmother.
You're killing.
That's not where we're at here. If she isn't going to die of her primary disease, she's still going to die.
Let's say I give her a girlfriend like OG Kush. How much will it not be the same when she comes home?
Well, you'd have to ask the grower that knew her well before she got so old.
You're funny that you say that. So I would have to tell you. So
I just took a private tissue culture class by the guy who does all the Jungle Boys tissue culture, Mike Hydro, right? Average charge is $5,000 per person, comes out. It's usually a 2-day thing. And he teaches you in your garden how to do TC, right? So we just went through that class about 2 weeks ago. And one of the things he always says is you need to ask what they put in their gel, in their agar or in their medium, because as you're talking about, there's an epigenetic change that happens. He refers, it's because of the hormones and the stuff they're using to clean that up. That's the change. So if you don't do that, so it's this thing of, it's not because it goes in the test tube, and because there's this misnomer, a lot of growers say, well, I'm not TCing anything because I don't want to change it. He's saying it's not that you TC'd it, it's that the hormones and the cleaner they're using in the agar is what's affecting the epigenetics. Well, it
depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you just want to keep a plant the same, you would put it on a minimal agar solution that basically just feeds it. Okay. And then you slow it down by chilling it, and keep it for a longer time. David and I always thought that tissue culture is best. We worked with it as well very early on. And it's quite easy. The idea originally was to make smuggleable varieties. I mean, a piece of callus tissue is a piece of callus tissue. Okay. But if you could turn that back into an OG or a skunk, then that's a different thing.
You can shoot it when you get home.
Callus is really easy to get roots to grow on and rather difficult to get it to shoot. And it's also was going to be part of the promise of gene editing, genetic engineering. But what it really is good for, what we always thought it'd be good for, is librarying. And it's a value to a producer when you get to a certain level, especially, but also to breeders in particular, because then you don't lose anything. You can go back to what you already had. And I learned this lesson with a vegetatively reproduced crop called strawberries many years ago. When I went to visit strawberry farmers and others too, they keep their clones, their clonal material, for 2 years before they toss it. In case something happens this year, you can go back and test the clonal material you got it from, find out what went wrong, if there was a somatic change, if something just changed on you, or if you messed up your tags or you did something wrong. You can go back a couple of generations, not generations sexually, but cloning generations, and then start over with the one from 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
Thought that was smart, but that's the way they run their industry. One thing you see these days that's really...
It's not that far different from David saving seeds from different generations and being able to go back to them.
No,
though.
breeders try to save as much as they can, but now that we all work with cuttings, the way to do it is with a in vitro library. Keeping a whole bunch of mothers is just waiting for things to go bad.
Picking up a virus or a
Yeah,
viroid.
pick up a virus or just putting them under really stressful conditions. Yeah, test tube stressful without hormones, okay? They don't grow that way naturally, but it's less stressful. It's not going to necessarily be 100%, but close.
You want to hear something interesting? We learned a tech, and I'm hoping I'm not putting somebody out here, but we learned a tech where we actually use our normal nutrient formula for vegetative growth as the base for either the agar mix or we were sterilizing cocoa as well and just using that in the autoclave to sterilize that and then turn that into propagation material as well. But we were doing side by sides because he's saying I like to use the agar because that's your bird in the cage in the coal mine, right? Where you're going to see almost the diseases want to leave the plant there, where we were autoclaving cocoa. But I thought that was interesting. He goes, Mike was explaining that he had done all these formulas that were based on orchid nutrients and things like that. And he's like, we were seeing the cannabis responding responding, freaking out. He said, and I just realized, like, why wouldn't we've done more nutrient research than almost any other. He says and this is not my words, but we've done more nutrient research than almost any other industry, constantly dialing. We have so many different varieties of nutrient companies and big ag bottled nutrient, He goes, why wouldn't you just use that as your baseline? So we did that, but it was just interesting that you say that because that was literally the conversations we were having is exactly what you're talking about now.
All the TC guys have realized that every single plant is different.
Yes.
It might only be a little bit different, but if you put something in your agar solution that doesn't suit it, it ain't going to work. So...
Even with callus,
but they can fine tune all of that. That's just simple trial and error experimenting. You can get the right media and the right combination for each variety if it's important enough to save those. And there'll be a general media that works for most things. There's a general STS treatment now that works for most things. And people aren't even so picky about their silver source anymore. But what's the problem is, how does the plant respond? If you take 10 different ones and do the same thing to them, you're going to get 10 different responses.
Yeah.
So that's a diversity that's wonderfully frustrating.
That's exactly.
We can't live without it, and we're having trouble living with it. So, yeah.
For those of us that keep clones, though, I remember asking you about this at Positronics in '96 about genetic drift, because we had customers come in saying it was genetic drift. You said, no, it's just picking up something, or inconsistency in cloning. And I thought, wow. And it really opened my eyes to it. When he told me that, it changed the way I cloned, because instead of taking clones from all the branches, I started just cutting them from the parts where they had matured, and then letting the lower branches come up and replace them. And there's pictures on my Instagram where it's just flat topped plants. And a lot of it came from, you remember when I got out of prison, you know exactly what I mean, letting them pre-grow. And I showed him an OG Kush that had some type of weird, it would go left. OG Kush always had one leaf went left. And asked him what it was, and at the time he couldn't identify it, but he made a comment that the way I was cutting clones, that you might outgrow the disease, because I was outpacing it, because I was taking just the little tips. And
turns out that little curved leaf thing and a couple other very subtle things are symptoms of HP, PLD, of hot plate and virus, which we didn't even know about at those times.
We
always wondered if it was a virus.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a fungus. I mean, it wasn't those things weren't coming from root fungi and things we already had the agricultural industry in general already had plenty of experience with. The thing that I think hop latent is teaching us and other diseases is don't be afraid to start over again. There's really good building blocks. You can get clean cuts from your neighbors. I mean, all the things you love so much are wrapped up in the trailer trash clusterfuck, as Michael Backus used to call it, which I think is a pretty good description of our modern mongrel gene pool.
Wow.
But don't be afraid to start over. Don't expect miracles. Clean up your act. There's been some good messages that came right along with COVID. Cleanliness is important, and
growers should go back to 10% bleach solutions, clean their tools, have good protocols for sterility.
All those things, and try not to spread the things you have, and be really careful about what you get from your neighbors. I mean, you don't get diseases unless you have contact. So start your own things from seed and test. Make sure you're not going down the wrong path, and then go for it. They're yours.
You think it's within our future that we'll be able to freeze cows' genetics, and then bring them out of being frozen to where, like, you're talking about a genetics library? I wake up and I go, 16 lights and a $2,000 electric bill, just keeping genetics alive that I haven't grown in years.
That would take $2,000 any day, bro. That would be
so
great.
There you go. And so we all know this. There's so many people listening that go, fuck, I have 4 lights at my house that I can't run at my facility because they're my backup genetics and I can't give them to the guy I'm working with. And we all have this backup room or rooms or full half facility of genetics that we're not running. We might not run for another 5 to 10 years, but we do need to hold on to these genetics or these building blocks. Do you think in our lifetime we'll be able to, because I always ask anybody that knows anything about genetics, one of my things is, do you think we'll be able to freeze? And the TC guy I was just with said, no, but people are figuring out how to freeze the callus, rerouting the callus, and then bringing out. And the guy I was at a wedding with, who was supposed to be at a big genealogy, he says, once you figure that out, you'll be able to do it with humans too, because the issue we're having is when the water in the blood, water forms in the blood.
Expands up to 10%. So when you freeze it, it expands and it blows apart the cells.
Do you think that we're going to see that in plants, to where you'd be able to have some type of cryogenically frozen genetic library where there's 10,000 cuts, and I have a room that's on a backup generator, and I have, essentially $1 billion worth of genetics. So when we have this genetics library, that it's like, hey, we have control of it. Because I feel like it's going to take someone like that to come in and say, oh man, they got all these genetics. Is anyone doing anything with all this? And then they realize what we have, we're fumbling this bag a little bit, and they step in and just wipe the slate clean. Start cataloging everything. Start trademarking everything.
It's not what companies do. Companies find one thing and they market it.
Yeah.
So
or 10 things and market it. I'm not an economics guy at all.
But people fear this. That's why I ask.
No, I think they're paranoid.
Okay.
They should smoke less
dope,
less stressful weed. I mean,
that's hilarious. But
it's not. I don't want to blow it off like that, though. I mean, why hasn't big business done this already? Let me turn this around.
Well, there was a jerk in Oregon who patented original haze.
I think they realized
that's okay, but
this is way
is
more
it defendable
nuance
in
of
court?
an industry than they thought. That's my opinion. Is they got in it. A lot of big money kind of stepped in and goes, "Oh, you can't buy cool."
No,
there's a lot to
right.
this.
It's not a threat to medicine, except people won't get prescriptions from doctors. But it's not of interest to medicine because there's no silver bullet. Cannabis is public domain.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to cubbyhole little bits of it and come up with. There's plenty of patents about cannabis. I don't know of any of them that have been to court yet, and getting a patent is relatively easy. Defending it is another story.
And look at Marinol as an example. It was moved to Schedule 3 in 1999 based on one of the reasons was it has no street value. There's been no Marinol diverted to stoners on the street. Nobody wants it. Nobody at Grateful Dead lot was like, you got some Marinol? Nobody. And it said nobody ever really. I mean, I gave you half a bottle. I didn't even take them. Yeah. You put them in a museum. I mean, because there's, They're not the best
Got
source.
you.
They're
No,
a single
it's-
molecule. They're not that exciting. Don't work like cannabis. I think people really long for like what works and the real thing. And I think people complaining about moving to Schedule 3 right now, I don't think understand that, look, pharmaceutical companies have already had access. If anything, it's only going to make it better for us for banking, things like that, because Schedule 1 is the most restrictive you could get it into. Schedule 3 isn't that different. You know, what I think is really going to be the shift for people is the removal of cannabis from the CSA, because at that point, you're going to have no state rights. All of this intrastate activity is going to become interstate activity, and you're going to see all these companies dissolve, and then it's going to be like liquor where you only have a few companies that can scale and have consistency and get to market, and it's all going to be federal regulation. And I personally think that the ATF will become the CATF because it's going to be regulated just like alcohol, tobacco, firearms, because it's so valuable.
Do you think it's going to happen in our lifetime?
Oh, without question. I mean, you know, my push right now is that prohibition doesn't make sense anymore because of the acknowledgement of the endocannabinoid system. It's a betrayal of science. It's a denial of biology at this point. And we're all going to wake up to it. The third movie I want to make is going to be about the endocannabinoid system. And basically the thrust of it is, haha, you're a cannabis plant. You're making the same chemicals as a cannabis plant. You could be a prohibitionist all day long, but your body's going to make AEA and make you smile. So whatever. And I think people need to understand this better. And I think cannabis will not only come back to where it really hits a level of celebrity that, you know, Justin Bieber and Britney Spears and Madonna could never know. You know what I mean? It's because it's biologically part of us. And we need it so much. And, you know, people like me that have been claiming that it helped them through cancer and helped them through various diseases, there's so many of us that you can't dismiss us anymore. You know, and I'm in the camp with Dennis Perone that all use is medical use. And he was saying that when we didn't even understand AEA or the endocannabinoid system. And it's true, though, because all cannabis use to your body is used medically. It's going to help balance you out. It's going to help deal with you the same way your body's dealing with AEA. And if we have a bad diet and our bodies cannot make AEA, this is also why I think so many people are embracing cannabis, because if they had a good diet and they were using a balance of essential fatty acids and their bodies were healthily making anandamide, they wouldn't crave the THC that they bumped into all that much. And I think that this is going to become a huge transformation. I believe that cannabis will be not just something people use, but something people supplement with, like vitamins and minerals. And they're also going to lean towards the acids because they don't get you high. As much as I like getting high, I like being healthy. I like being balanced. I like sleeping well and waking up optimistic, feeling good about myself. And that's what a good diet, that's what EFAs do. That's what it does. And really, I think that what will end up happening is you'll probably see more people ingesting EFAs in balance and less people ingesting cannabis overall time, but they'll still be ingesting cannabis because hemp seed oil is the most perfectly balanced vegetable oil on the planet, where it gives you a 3-to-1 ratio of W6 to W3. And I believe when more people recognize and realize this in the future, cannabis is going to become even more popular, where you're going to see it in every store. You'll see it in every house, because it'll be an integral part of being healthy.
I'm looking forward to that day. I'm looking forward to the day where we don't see lawmakers getting involved and playing game prices with 24% taxes, and we actually see some research on terpenes, and we kind of open these doors, and I'm hoping and it's in our lifetime. And I appreciate both you gentlemen's time, and I know people are going to want part 2. I already know, because I'm cutting it early. I'm not going 4.5, 6 hours like you guys want, but man, I had a blast with these guys. And if you want to look more into both what these guys are doing, I know after our first episode with Todd, everyone was calling me going, is the haze real? Is this real haze? This isn't piff, right? And I'm saying it's not the piff from New York. It's a completely different thing. Yes, it's the skunk, but it's not the skunk you think it is. It's the great skunk that I had to explain to people, but we love what you're doing, Todd. And Robert, man, for our whole, I'm in my 40s now, really been a fan of what you've been up to. And from what I can ascertain and understand and utilize in my life, I've had so many great growers ask me when the names pop up, and I'm always interested to see who are they going to ask me who I should have on. You're one of the top 3 names that comes up consistently with great growers. Like guys that I'm excited to have on, I always ask them after the camera's cut. I'm like, who would you have on? Who do you think would be a great convo? Or who do you think your name? And I'm not even gassing you up. It comes up a lot. And so that's when Todd called me and said, he's going to be in town. I asked my video guy, I said, bro, it's Friday night. I know you don't want to do video in the middle of, we're going to drive to an hour and a half and let's go do this because I just really appreciate you making time and sitting down with us and doing something you don't have to do. You know, I thank you for that.
Well, thanks for having us. I mean, you get a lot of following, and that's good. You ask good questions. You set it up nice, and yeah, I'll come back sometime.
I would love to. I'd love to have you to our studio, and I brought Rob some gifts. Shout out LA Family Farms for the Zamosa. Brought him some of that. He'll be smoking on, and we got some 3rd gen Family Farms Piatella sitting on the table. We'll get into that, but First Smoke family, look into what Robert Clarke is up to. Go on Amazon, type in Robert Clarke Botany, type in Robert Clarke Cannabis, Robert Clarke Cannabis Marijuana, any version of that, and take a look at the books though that pop up and find one that you're going to be interested in because everyone speaks to different parts of what you might be into as a grower, a hash maker, a connoisseur, a smoker. Find your entryway into learning more about what this plant's about and what you love about this and why you love it, because there's going to be connections that really enlighten you and could send you on a journey that you just don't know what you're about to go on. And Todd seeds are that connection. I want to talk to everyone about that. There's growers out there that love rare genetics and are always asking me about the super skunk I used to grow back in the day. And they ask me, what are your top 3 strains of all time? And I always say super skunk is one of the top 3 for me. Yeah. Unbelievable cultivar that I still to this day can just vividly almost smell and sitting in the living room trimming it. And AGE Seed Co.
agseedco.com.
agseedco.com.
Yep. Just look up Todd McCormick or Authentic Genetics. All over, you know.
And do you have any, we got a free shipping code or anything like that, Todd? Can we do FSOTD for a free shipping code for the?
I run discounts on everything, and everything is always discounted. I got seeds as low as $1 on the site right now. 25 seeds for $25.
Come on.
I'm trying to lower the prices because I want to make high quality more accessible to everybody. And you know, look, 30 years ago, I could plant the seed of knowledge in your mind. Now I could put the seeds in your hand, and I wish you well with it. So I'm trying my best to make everything happy.
What's the branch sitting in front of us, Todd?
This is a hybrid haze. This is a haze with kind of skunk and northern lights in it. It's a little combination of all 3. It would, if you smell it, a lot of people would be calling it something like Jack Herer, but really
but
what
not
they're picking
the J1,
up,
it's different. It's the old Jack Herer.
They're picking up a little bit of the haze and a little bit of the northern lights in the same time.
Yeah.
A little less the skunk.
I love a good sativa. I know we don't like to say that as far as sativa.
How would you, sir, what would you say that is, Mr. Clarke? With all that
microphone.
With old Ed Holloway, I used to squish buds and hold him up to his nose. He'd give me countries of origin. He turned 80 in 96. Oh, he was a gem. I loved him. We left Amsterdam and went back to Bel Air together. He was with me up in Bel Air when I was doing the 4,000 plants, and he went home for a little while and got sick. He didn't come home. That's why he didn't get busted with me. Thank heavens.
Yeah.
And I love him forever. What a great guy. He was at his birthday party. He was when he turned 80. These
what
guys brought him
it?
bags of Afghan.
Nice bud.
Yeah. No, it's
Train wreck, very good.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Hazy, yeah.
Where can they find your books? Is it on Amazon or do you have a specific site where they're all on?
No, they're all on they're all available one way or another on Amazon.
That's what I figured.
There's another really good book on Amazon now that I think about it. Another facet of the cannabis plant. It's called Cannabis Textiles. And it was recently released a year or two ago by a woman named Git Skoglund. And it's really fascinating. It shows you that cannabis textiles are not just rough sacks and utilitarian things. This is about fine cannabis textiles. And yeah, it's also an Amazon publication. It's right there.
Yeah, because when you think about it, you think of like the old bales and shit. And you don't think of that.
Believe it or not, these Levi's I'm wearing are hemp and cotton. They're the ones that they did with Outer Loan, where they combined Levi's put out hemp for a little while. And it's kind of cool.
This is hemp and cotton, island hemp wear. Good Chinese hemp and cotton blend. So still available.
And it's cool because if you're interested in that conversation, you and I went down that road because I asked him that one of my questions was, well, how are we not using it? Because it looks like cannabis. We can't use something that's so amazing. And we went down like a 45-minute road about laws and, economics and money. And it is really like, God, the money is the root of all evil sometimes. And you really realize that as you get older because you run into these roadblocks and you go, it just doesn't make any sense. And then you go, oh, money.
The Tax Act was to tax it out of existence because they didn't put it in the Harrison Narcotics Act in 1914 because at the time it didn't fit the criteria that it wasn't refined, distilled, or manufactured. So they didn't feel like they had the right to prohibit it. And it wasn't. This is why the 37 was a tax act, because at the time the government didn't feel that they had the right to prohibit something that was naturally grown. And hey, and I challenge all the Christians out there. Are you questioning God? Is that what you're really doing with your prohibition? You saying God got it wrong? Because to me, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, pharmaceutical companies screw up all the time, but God? Oh my gosh.
No, he didn't mess up. We know that. So that's why we're here. Yeah, man, it's been my pleasure. First smoke of the day. Man, we're almost at 200 episodes. Get on FSOTD.com where we're about to break open a couple bricks of hash, start smoking while my guys breaking down the set. But it was my pleasure. Robert Clarke, Todd McCormick, and first smoke of the day. We're out. Peace.
Cheers.
First Smoke family. If you want more video, unreleased content, stuff we can't put on YouTube, you want early drops, weeks and weeks in advance, FSOTD.com gets you all that. You become part of the family, you get hooked up with early content, you get unreleased content we can't put out on YouTube because we get age restricted and we get strikes, the whole deal. FSOTD.com gets you hooked up like family. But if you just want to keep watching, here we go. Let's let another one roll.